We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories. More people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
So you know your camera's live.
So I shouldn't like make my ass.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor. Yes, IMHO Talk Show. Back like we never left for yet another episode. Taking Seville to the world and bringing the world to Seville as you have trusted us to do thus far. So happy Sunday to everybody. There is, as always, so much going on in our community to where we wish we could bring this to you every single day. Maybe every week, but we make it do what it do regardless. And then where we at, your flagship station 101 Jam, Charlottesville's #1 for hip hop, R&B, and the classics. And I am Charles. And as always, we are, representing the people. And thanks to all of our listeners, thanks to all of our supporters, as always. As we're in this season, this time of the year, approaching another end of another year and approaching a new year. So, it's particularly a time where folks start reevaluating a lot of ways that we get involved in the community, how we give and things of that sort, particularly in the nonprofit sector, nonprofit realm. And so to kick off today's show, without further ado, that is why we have our friend, our partner with us once again, Miss Erin O'Hare of Charlottesville Tomorrow fame. Erin, good to see you once again. How are you today?
I'm doing all right, Charles. It's always good to be here. Love coming in and, seeing what's new in the studio and getting to chat with you and other folks who are listening. I love radio. So it's always nice to come on.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. But, you're trying to flatter us saying what's new. It's the same old digs.
Isn't
same old
it?
digs. But thank you for being nice, though. I appreciate that.
Well, it's always a little different. Like, it depends on who's in, right?
Yeah.
It's always someone different. Well, you're always here, but, different folks coming through, and I just love the variety. So it's nice to come in and meet new folks and feel the different vibes.
Yes, indeed. So, family, tell a friend, 'cause you don't want to miss today's show. And this is just the beginning. Later on, we're gonna be joined by none other than Joshua Renee of Spillteem. Excellent. Yes, right. Josh.
I do.
Excellent when it comes to communicating, all communication skills and training and teaching folks and inspiring people to be their authentic selves. Don't want to miss it. Middle, we have Freddie Jackson. That's Mr. Love No Ego of Love No Ego Foundation, talking about the mentoring and work that he has going on, because our youth and our families need it more than ever. But like I said, this hour, you heard the lovely voice of Miss Erin O'Hare, and she brought some friends along as well.
I did.
So before, so I'm sure everybody's been saying, they've been looking forward to this. And so before we even dig into the subject matter, so to speak, I want, you all online to introduce yourself, talking about none other than gentleman who was a fan favorite when he came on, Sunshine Mathon, and also we are joined by Miss Sarah Malpass. So, Sunshine, I'm going to kick it to you first to kind of break the ice for Sarah. Since this is her first time with us, so Sunshine, go ahead and reintroduce yourself to the people.
Sure thing. Good to see you, Charles. That was an inspiring opening overall. I really appreciated it.
Thank you.
I'm Sunshine Mathon, the executive director at Piedmont Housing Alliance, and it seems like we're making this a regular thing, Charles.
Yes. And I definitely appreciate that, because we appreciate your work. So the more regular, the better. Thank you. Thank you for joining us again. And Miss Sarah.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sarah Malpass. I'm a resident of the Fifeville neighborhood and also a part of the Fifeville Neighborhood Association. Great to be with you.
All right. Thank you. Thank you all for sure. So, Erin, I'm going to kick it over to you right now, because, to formally introduce the business of why we're here, because the folks in the Fifeville neighborhood, the folks on Cherry Avenue, even more specifically, to get even more precise, has been in the news recently when it comes to property and land there, and as it relates to how we continue to grow as a city, what development, what resources may be needed for the neighborhood.
Yes.
As with always, sometimes it takes a little adjustment to get used to change. Sometimes it's just the change itself. Sometimes there's misunderstandings. But, again, being, here at IMHO, being a fan of, folks like Mr. Sunshine Mathon, and, and the way that he goes about his work when it comes to redevelopment.
Yeah.
Definitely are delighted to have you all with us. I wanted you, as the reporter with Charlottesville Tomorrow, to kind of bring us up to speed and to, give us the overview of your report, and then we can't wait to hear from the folks that are involved in the process, like Sunshine and Sarah. And before I kick it to you, I want people to know too that this is the beginning of a series that Erin and I talked about to keep folks informed. We also will have on residents of the community from both sides, those who may be totally pro and those who may not be so sure about about things, how they think it could affect the community. And then city leaders in general, we want to have on with us too, on what this means for the city.
Yeah. And I am so glad that we could do a series because it relates so deeply into what you all brought to us with your housing conversation at the Jefferson School a few weeks ago. Your Can I Talk to You, Seville?
Thank you.
That was the kickoff event for that series, right?
Yes,
So,
it was. And thank you for plugging it, because end of January, y'all stay tuned. End of January, we're going to have a second series of Can I Talk to You, Seville?
Yeah, but anyone who's interested in housing who missed that conversation, you should really go on to the IMHO and Vinegar Hill Facebook pages and watch that conversation. Sunshine was involved as well. And to my surprise, I don't know why I was surprised, but Fifeville came up. And these couple of stories that we're talking about today that I've been working on for a very long time, folks like Sunshine and Sarah and Anthony Woodard from Woodard Properties and his right-hand man, Chris, Carmelita, residents, everyone's been so patient with me. This has been months and months and months of reporting. So I just always want to thank the folks who share their stories and help me find information to fact check that information to put into stories. So none of this is just me, right? I just get to be the vector for, quite honestly, more than a dozen people's voices for these. So I'm just, I kind of get to compile them all together, but I'm glad that we have folks who are here to just speak on their own behalf, which is really important and something that you all do so well. So
thank you. And Angelique Shaw being, the new CEO over there, Charlottesville Tomorrow, I know how big of a fact checker she is. So I know she wasn't going to let you off the hook.
No. And I don't like to let myself off the hook. It's like the worst thing when someone has to, or when I get an email and someone's like, that's not right. I'm like, no, but it's important that I know.
Yeah.
So.
And I heard you mention Woodard Properties as well. I can't wait to speak more, with the leadership there, because for the simple fact of, it seems like when good has been done, whether it's been through Sunshine or others, when it comes to our neighborhoods and our communities, Woodard Properties, it seems to be a very reputable organization, so that's always good to see when you see landlords or property owners or whatnot who are well versed in the history of a community or of a neighborhood, and they take to mind the elements of of the quality of life here when it comes to what they provide. So, so definitely shouts out to Woodard Properties.
Yeah. And they're doing something really unusual, which is what we'll talk about. I've got a couple of things that I've brought in today. One is the Fifeville, what would you call it? The Fifeville edition of our Changing Charlottesville series. It's, I think I've been on to talk about Changing Charlottesville before. But I think, okay, I can hear myself in these. It's a very long series. I'm looking at each neighborhood in Charlottesville based on U.S. Census data that show a lot of the changes, as well as firsthand accounts from the neighborhoods. And what we're looking at, because this is what was available online, was data from 2013 to roughly present day. So I know that a lot of the changes that have happened in Fifeville have been going on for a really long time, and they are not all of them are completely reflected in this data because we didn't have available to us to crunch digitally the way that we did that information. So with that acknowledgement, I did speak with a lot of folks who've lived in the neighborhood for a long time, like Miss Marcia Johnson, Miss Rosa Ayers, Miss Carmelita, of course, Sarah herself, some young folks.
And you're talking about legends there, by the way. I just want you to know.
It's an honor to be able to interview them for these stories.
Yeah, I definitely want to shout them out and give them their flowers. You're talking about pillars of, of this community.
Yeah, when I was chatting with Miss Marcia, I didn't know that JJ is her son. I was like, oh my gosh, I've interviewed him about his art in my previous life as a arts and culture reporter. So that was a fun connection to make.
Yeah.
So excuse me, I'm just getting over some things, so I'm gonna have to clear my throat. But so in this Fifeville piece, it's, there's plenty of history in here, and I won't necessarily go over it because you can go online and read it, but Fifeville is one of the oldest and the most dense neighborhoods of Charlottesville. And like neighborhoods close to it, 10th and Page, Rose Hill, also historically Black neighborhoods, also historically lower income neighborhoods, they've seen a lot more changes than other neighborhoods in Charlottesville in the past few decades. And I'm always surprised a little bit when I get into the numbers, right? You hear a lot of stories, and I know that you all have heard them too and seen them, right? If you've lived in the area long enough, you've seen the changes. I remember when I moved to town 14 and a half years ago, I did my laundry at the laundromat in Fifeville, and that's gone. And I remember the neighborhood just looked really different. I remember people told me, don't go to Dice Street. And so, I mean, of course, that's like the first place I went because I was like, what? What are you talking about? But I remember that when I first moved here. And now it's very different. It's very different. And like I can see it visually. And then talking with long-term residents, they wouldn't be able to afford the homes that they have now. Like Miss Marcia was talking about that, and hopefully she'll be able to come on and share some of her own story too. But
yeah, now what I want to sort of insert there though, is that like that's crucial because you mentioned a laundromat.
Yes,
but it's important to think of how to some folks how trivial like a laundromat may be,
right?
But to some folks, to others, it is a needed resource in the community. You know what I mean? It's a necessity.
It is.
Like, so those are the kind of things, that we're going to be talking about, when it comes to how we look at redevelopment, like what we keep, what we, and what we remove. And one other question for you too. Curious, like for the scope of this conversation, the folks who mentioned stay away from Dice Street, were they people of the neighborhood or people from outside? Of course
they weren't.
Okay.
Of course not.
I just wanted to clarify.
It was, I came here for grad school, and it was other folks at UVA who were like, just don't go to that area. That's like the bad area of town. And I lived on Cherry Ave at the time. So they were also like, oh, that part of Grady. But then I babysat for a family down there, and I was like,
there you go.
Why won't Domino's bring a pizza here? It was very odd to me. I also grew up in a bigger city. I grew up in the Boston area. So I just, it was not what I expected.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, this is actually like, this is really cute and people are nice.
Right.
And then I realized what was going on. Is like, oh,
yeah,
this is racism.
Yeah.
And classism.
Right.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's all relative, right? Coming from a bigger city to a smaller town, to you, it's like, I'm like, we have sort of bigger problems, but it's relative.
It's so relative. Yeah. And it's different. At the end of the day, it all affects people in negative ways. And it's our responsibility as neighbors to, I think, make it a better place to live for all of us. So that's kind of where I come from with all of my neighborhood reporting. So hopefully this series can help folks really understand some of the changes that are going on that we can't really see. You can see a coat of paint. You can see that different folks are living on the street, maybe younger people versus older folks, all of that. But it was really interesting and on a personal level, kind of frightening to see some of these changes. What we saw a lot in the Fifeville piece as we were looking in was, as folks know, displacement, right? We all know that anecdotally that people are being displaced from Fifeville, right? It's like you hear folks saying, well, my neighbor couldn't afford to live in the city because of property taxes, or their home was falling apart and they couldn't afford to fix it up. And then, so you hear about that, and there are folks who know that that's happening, and then it's a whole different thing to see it in the numbers, right? Right. So so
what's that look like?
Right. Yeah. So some of the things that are pretty significant for Fifeville, well, one, it has been and continues to be a majority Black neighborhood, which I was like, that's great. It's great to see that, because in other neighborhoods throughout the city, you've seen that switch. A majority Black neighborhood is now a majority white neighborhood. And then you see neighborhoods that have been majority white getting actually whiter. So it was interesting to see in Fifeville that I can hear so much better. Thank you. that Fifeville, is still a majority Black neighborhood, more than 50%. And then, the percentage of people from other racial and ethnic backgrounds, like Asian, not Hispanic, or Latino, those populations are also growing as well. So you're seeing more diversity in Fifeville through that lens.
And like that's going to be a caveat to address when we get the city leaders in as well. Because when I hear you talking, first thing that came to my mind is that then we have to consider things like predatory lending and things of that sort, because we know for a fact on how it's disproportionate when it comes to the resources given to a neighborhood, or the interest rates, or like the property values, things like that, when it's a predominantly Black neighborhood. So so then we're digging deeper into this crust, right?
I can't wait for the city leaders to weigh in on that, because it's a huge thing that we have to think about. It's not just the transactions. There's all kinds of stuff underneath that. And another thing about Fifeville is that its overall population has grown significantly. So between 2013 and 2021, its overall population, according to the census, grew by more than 800 people. That's that's almost, what was it? Almost 1/4. That's huge. And then there were more homes, right? So there were 114 more homes in the neighborhood. I couldn't quite figure out where that came from. Like, there wasn't a huge development built. Maybe there are just, more places that are homes. I wasn't quite sure. But there's more homes, and the vacancy rate has dropped. So in 2013, about 12% of the neighborhood's households were vacant, which is a pretty high vacancy rate. But by 2021, the vacancy rate was under 5%. So that means that chances to live in Fifeville are also getting more scarce. So that means that folks who've lived in the neighborhood for a long time are going to have a harder time staying there if they want. And a lot of folks, I think, do want to stay there. That's where their families have been for a long time, based on the stories that I've heard.
The majority of people in Fifeville own their homes, or are they renting?
So 60% of Fifeville residents are renters. And 60%. That's a little higher than the city average, but city average is about half and half. So we have half renters, half homeowners. But the data does show that in the last few years, there have been small increases in the percentage of owner-occupied homes. So home ownership is rising in Fifeville, at least incrementally. We'll see if that trend continues.
And that's very interesting. You're talking about, again, a historic neighborhood. So then that lends itself as to some of it flight, like Black flight, to where folks, went into county or whatever the case may be, and then now if you try to come back, then things are priced. So, or the 40% that may own, then like you said, then you run into a tax issue. On whether or not I can hold on to this property, and I want you to get to the end of the data that you're mentioning, and then I want to get Sunshine and Sarah to chime in. But I'll let you finish.
Because what you were just saying actually is the thing that shocked me the most, and was what I think the biggest finding in combing through all this data, which I've done with the help of Evan Mitchell, who's a data scientist. We've been working on this project for 3 years. It was part of his senior capstone at UVA, and he was so invested in wanting to do a really great project for Charlottesville. So he's stuck on and has done all the graphs and has helped me understand the data. And so he's a huge part of this too. So thank you so much to Evan. So one thing that we found, median household income going up across the board in Charlottesville. However, we looked at income distribution in every neighborhood. So in Fifeville, this paints a really crisp picture of how the neighborhood is changing financially, which means it's changing in all these other ways too. So in 2013, 10 years ago, Fifeville was pretty economically diverse. So household incomes were distributed pretty evenly across the spectrum. You had you can kind of see it here, right? We have the less than $20,000 household income, 20,000 to about 40, 40 to 60, 60 to 100, and then 100,000 or more. So you can see that's relatively the same, but you have more households in the less than $20,000 a year income than any other income bracket. By 2021, which is 8 years later, more Fifeville households fell into the highest income bracket. earning $100,000 or more each year than any other. So it's flipped from the lowest income bracket that we measured to the highest. And that is huge. That doesn't mean that wages are going up. It means that people with more money are moving in, and people who make less money are leaving. They're being pushed out. So that to me was just, I was like, this can't be right. Is there something wrong? Like this is a complete flip, but it's correct. And it really matches with what folks in the neighborhood are seeing.
Yeah.
So that was the big one for me. So knowing this, like I had this done a little while ago. And then when I started working on this piece about the 501 Cherry Ave proposed project and the agreement that they've entered into, which is so unusual, I was like, we have to run these together because they're so related. I think so many of the things that have come up in this piece that we're looking at with the data are they're the things that this project knows and they're looking at addressing directly. So that's why I was really glad that Sunshine and Sarah could come in and speak to some of that. So
absolutely. So and we do have a listener question as well. And so I will ask this in case you came across data within your research in Sunshine.
Oh, I did a lot.
And I know it, and Sarah could chime in as well. But the question is, if we know that certain communities were targeted for incarceration, why though? You know, so the way I interpret it, and Max can interpret it as well, but is that part of the effect on a community is the incarceration rates, and and Black, particularly young Black men being targeted and whatnot. So did you come across data to where that played a part when it came to the makeup of the community?
We did not, but that is something I would really like to look into.
Okay, please do.
Yeah.
Please do. Okay, Max, and I'll kick it to Sunshine.
Is Fifeville mainly composed of single-family homes, or are these, and forgive me for just not knowing all the details, but single-family homes or big developments where we have, apartment complexes or whatnot?
Sure. So Fifeville is mainly single-family homes.
Okay.
The parameters are, it goes from like Ridge Street, where where Tonsler Park is, like Ridge Street kind of forms one of the boundaries. And there's like that side up over like Prospect and the Greenstone, Orangedale areas. That is also Fifeville. It goes out to about Forest Hills Park. And then it's also hemmed in by West Main Street. So when you think about those, it's a lot of older homes, like on the Cherry Avenue corridor. Those homes are like pretty old. They're some of the oldest in the city. They're like built in the 1890s or so. And then once you get out a little further, you've got like the duplexes on Prospect and Orangedale up there.
So is Fifeville a design control district?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's a good question.
Okay.
Sunshine might know the answer. Sarah.
And then do we know how the proposed zoning ordinance will affect the Fifeville neighborhood?
Yes.
And I don't know if I'm jumping ahead.
No, that's okay.
Well, I definitely want Sunshine and Sarah to chime in, but those are great questions.
Yeah, it is. I think so. I actually have another story that I hope will run tomorrow, but there's a proposed district in the new ordinance called RNA zoning. And the idea for that is that it's intended to be an anti-displacement measure. And most of Fifeville is that zoning. It's a little complex, but it doesn't freeze the zoning. It just says it's trying to prevent tear downs of older homes that could just be repaired. The idea is you could, like, they don't want to, what is, like, I have to read that one over again, but they don't want to like take away wealth building opportunities from the families who are living in those neighborhoods, because how many times has that been done? Right. So they didn't want to make a policy.
That's always the catch.
Exactly. Right. So they didn't want to just upzone everything else in the city and keep these other neighborhoods like frozen so that people miss out on those opportunities. So this is a different look at that. So yes, most of Fifeville is the RNA zoning.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
And family, once again, we are joined by none other than Charlottesville Tomorrow's Erin O'Hare, and her report on the redevelopment in the Fifeville neighborhood. And we are also joined by Sunshine Mathon of Piedmont Housing Alliance and Sarah Malpass of the Fifeville Neighborhood Association. So Sunshine and Sarah, after hearing all that, hearing Sarah, Erin's synopsis of her report, hearing the data, even hearing a listener's question about communities like this being targeted by incarceration. I saw you taking notes, so I guess Sunshine, I'll kick it to you first when it comes, and probably give your exact role in this when it comes to what we're discussing, the Fifeville development, and then your take on Aaron's report, what we discussed so far.
How long is your show?
Right. I mean, we're supposed to have the hour, but
yeah, there's a lot in there to talk about. But I'll just say shortly that we are partnering with Woodard Properties and a true partnership with the Fifeville Neighborhood Association and Sarah as a representative to look at the redevelopment of the 501 Cherry site, specifically through the lens of trying to keep as much affordability in the neighborhood as the neighborhood continues to change. And so that's the nature of it. So we're going to, the goal of that site as it currently is envisioned is around 70 apartment homes, some of which will be set aside for seniors, some of which will be for families, and they'll be at a range of incomes. The exact numbers are still being worked through because, frankly, how deep we can go in the affordability is driven by how much subsidy we can find. And so we work really, really hard to try to find as much as we can. But it takes time and it takes commitment from the city, from the state, from federal sources, et cetera, and from philanthropic sources too. So we put all those together to try to, basically what we do is we replace what would be otherwise be debt on a property that the property then has to pay. Instead, we replace it with subsidy so that we can keep the rents low as possible in perpetuity for forever. So those 70 homes will be on second to fourth story of 2 buildings, and on the ground floor are going to be partnerships with Music Resource Center, Twice as Nice, and hopefully a new grocery store as well. That'll be a neighborhood scale grocery, really focused on serving the neighborhood needs.
Real quick, Sunshine, of those homes that you're talking about, what is the largest bedroom size, or what's the range of bedroom size that those?
So we're experimenting a little bit on this one. So normally we do 1 to 3 bedrooms. So we have some 1 bedrooms, some 2s, and some 3s, and we are experimenting with some studios as well this time.
Mm-hmm.
And partially because we know that a couple of things. One is that on the one building where we're going to focus serving seniors, we know some seniors actually do well in a studio context. Having a smaller unit can sometimes be a good thing. We're also going to be setting aside
specifically seniors or disabled as well.
That's exactly where I was going. So we're also setting aside a certain number of units to serve developmentally and physically disabled individuals as well. Mm-hmm. So those studios will also have a set aside for that population too.
And will the disabled population, forgive me if I'm offending anyone by not using the right terminology, will they have a preference over those that are can fall into the elderly category?
So there will be, I don't know the exact numbers of the distribution between the 70 units and how much are in the senior property versus the other, but let's just say it's half and half right now. So of the 35 units approximately in the senior building, we are still working through the numbers, but we'll probably have a preference for somewhere between 10 and 15% of those units for people with developmental disabilities. Mm-hmm. But then after that, it'll be anyone 55 and older. And then anyone who has a disability, they can still occupy those other units, but there'll just be a preference for that first 10 or 15%.
Mm-hmm. Now, before we hear from Sarah Sunshine, I had a question for you because you are involved in so many of these types of developments. I'm always curious about how you handle the conversation when it comes to the divide between people of color in particular, the ones that may be middle income, let's say, and ones that are considered low income or even at the poverty level. Like when it comes to explaining that this is a historically Black neighborhood, but there's chance for opportunity, and then we use, like the term affordable, quote unquote affordable. Like, just give me some insight on this project in particular when it comes to having both sides of the argument, because I see it a lot, to where it can serve, say, Black families and Black community, but but we're not a monolith at the same time. Like, so kind of give me some insight on when you're explaining, development to the community.
So I'm going to say it in a similar way that we've talked about our partnership on Prospect Avenue for 5 townhomes that we're doing as home ownership there, which is different than this project, but the approach will be similar. Where in those 5 homes on Prospect Ave, we have a preference for a limited period of time. Fair housing still controls what we do, so we have to follow the law. But for a limited period of time, we have a preference for people who currently live in the neighborhood or who have been recently displaced, who lived there recently but had to move out because they couldn't afford to live there anymore. So we will do a similar thing as we work towards the lease up of when the 70 units are ready. We'll have a preference for a limited period of time, because we can't do it permanently. You can't do that under fair housing law. But we'll have for that period of time, for a limited period of time, where we will do outreach in partnership with the neighborhood association, with church groups, with the neighbors that we have ongoing relationships with. We'll do outreach so that folks in the neighborhood or folks that they know who have been recently displaced have an opportunity to kind of get the first look at it. And then after that point, per fair housing law, we have to it's first come, first serve. That being said, this goes back to the depth of affordability and the depth and breadth. So the depth is how deep can we go? How affordable can we get? And one of the things that I highlight every time is that every property that we own and operate accepts housing choice vouchers. So just right off the bat, we'll have 70 new homes, brand new, who, for those folks who have a housing choice voucher and are struggling to find something in the city, which many people are, will accept those housing choice vouchers. So that gets to the deepest levels of affordability and not on that front. We'll have a certain percentage of units dedicated and set aside for people with at 30% of the area median income and below. And what that translates to a little bit, it's a changing number, as Aaron was talking about, and I'll touch on that in a minute too. But that is, for households making, typically between, say, 15 and maybe 25,000 a year as a general range, and that's a household, not just necessarily an individual. And then we'll have some homes, some of those apartments set aside for people at 50% of the area median income, which again will be a range of probably that 25 to 50,000 a year. And then we'll have some homes set aside for people at 60% AMI up to, say, maybe 60 or 65,000 a year. And the basic idea is that's the way that this kind of development is financed through the federal government, that we get what are called low income housing tax credits. That's the biggest financial tool that we have to work with. They work with us to set what those rents are based on those income tiers. So the biggest opportunity we have as a community to drive down that affordability is to invest more dollars in the project so that we can go lower in that affordability spectrum. Does that answer your question, Charles?
Yes. And you answered it more so later in your answer. And I'm hoping people picked up on it. And listeners, if we missed anything with that answer, please chime in and let us know. Because again, to me, you did, because I was getting to like that, like the heart of the conversation, right? Of when you have some Black residents that are saying, "Oh, I see how this is for us," and then you have other Black residents that are saying this is not for the Black community. You see what I'm saying? And Sarah may chime in on that as well, but I think Max had something for you.
Yeah, you mentioned that this particular project would be for those who who once lived in the neighborhood but couldn't moved out because they no longer could afford to. And so for me, the devil's in the details. And so do you mean could no longer afford to because they were evicted, because they lost their home, because they lived there as a child and just simply the parents could not afford to live there, so they decided to move or had to move?
Yeah, so we're not going to make any distinction between those. So basically we're going to say, if you essentially can show that you had to leave the neighborhood at some point or another for whatever reason that reason is, we're going to work with you to try to find a home at the community if we can make it work.
So eviction debt will not matter in terms of eligibility for housing.
So we always take in information when we do an intake for somebody. All of those play a factor. When there is eviction history, we have a conversation. It does not mean that they can't rent, but it does mean that we want to have a conversation to understand the circumstance, to ensure that we don't get into a bind in the future for them or for us. So there's a conversation there, but it's not a no.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then before we move on, I got to go back to the bedroom sizes. I'm sorry. So in terms of like the 3-bedroom and studio apartments, how many people, because some of us have larger families. I, for one, that husband and 5 children in the house.
5?
So 5 kids. 5 kids. Well, one of them is not there. One's off in college. But so how many people to a 3-bedroom or to a studio if that, I guess, proposed project gets approved?
So good question. I don't know that I know the precise answer on the 3-bedroom. There are guidelines that we have to follow, but I think for a studio or 1-bedroom, it's 2 people. For a 2-bedroom, I believe it is 4 people, and for a 3-bedroom, and I'm saying this a little off the cuff here, so I'm not 100% certain. For a 3-bedroom, I think it's 6, maybe 7. But that is a question I'd have to come back on to answer for sure.
Yeah.
And
so we got some big families out there, and I
know, and I do want to highlight that not every project does it make sense to do every housing type. So we've never done a studio before, but we're trying studio apartments because we know there's a long list on the public housing choice voucher list that needs smaller units. So we're trying to address that issue. We're also trying to create as many units as possible. And there is an inherent balance point there between the larger the units we make, the less units we make. There's just a limited amount of square footage. So we have to operate within that envelope, and you have to make strategic choices. And in this context, in partnership with the neighborhood and talking it through with neighborhood leadership, we decided to go this path. On another project, we have 4 bedrooms. So it depends a little bit on the profile of the individual project.
Now, Sarah, you've been waiting so patiently, but you know, as you can see, we're pretty informal, but we're about real talk here, and even more importantly, real action. So you could have chimed in at any point, Sarah. But thank you for waiting so patiently. So, but Sarah, like I got to break the ice with you because, again, we're real talk here, and so you're here representing the Fifield Neighborhood Association. So you realize that some of our viewers are going to see this and be like, "Now we heard all the data that Aaron said. Now Sarah, is not a person of color, by the looks of things. So, but you're representing, right. So you're here representing the Fifield Neighborhood Association. So, so I want you to speak on your role there, and and the insight that you can provide, when it comes to that being a representative of the neighborhood.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. So I moved to the neighborhood in 2010. I had moved to Charlottesville in 2007. And I moved to Fifield because I had been involved with Charlottesville Abundant Life Ministry. So I'd been working with kids and families in the neighborhood for a while. And when I finished up at UVA, I felt like I wanted to move into a community where there was a real sense of community, where I knew people, and where I could just begin to start my adult life. So I was about 25 when I moved to Fifield in 2010, and have been there ever since. It's been a really lovely place for me to be. And I really appreciate that you started out by acknowledging that I'm not a person of color. I'm not part of the Black majority of the neighborhood, but I have been engaged with community development for a long time in the community, starting with working with kids programs at Abundant Life. And then ultimately in 2015, I started coming to neighborhood association meetings. And I started coming because I heard through my neighbors that there was a hullabaloo going on about the new hotel that was getting built on Cherry Avenue. And so I decided to come and see what was going on, and really got the opportunity to become a part of the larger conversation around displacement in our community. And so I've been at the neighborhood since then, serving in a variety of roles. Currently, I'm the vice president. Our president is Carmelita Wood, who is African-American and who has been fearlessly leading this conversation for a long time.
Yeah, and we plan to have her on eventually too, right?
We hope.
Yeah.
She's at church,
Okay.
but she did.
She
send
provided a
quote,
quote, right?
She did.
Yeah.
So
Mexico.
we've got
Yeah.
Miss Carmelita
you
is
mind
so
reading
busy.
that? You mind reading her statement?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
if you're or Max maybe. Okay. Okay. Well.
Yes, this is Carmelita, the president
Sure.
of the Fifeville Neighborhood Association.
Yeah, and Carmelita and Sarah, to my lens, have worked really closely together. So Carmelita seemed comfortable with Sarah representing on the air today. But Miss Carmelita says, Fifeville was once a thriving Black community. Over the years, it has changed, and now it is a very diverse community. Children of the elderly who moved away, or parents pasted on moved away and sold the homes, and some have become rentals, and some were fixer-uppers and sold for a huge profit. This has increased property values and taxes, which some residents couldn't afford to stay in Fifeville. In trying to stop this from continuing to happen, putting something in place between developers, neighborhood leaders, and residents, like the Memorandum of Understanding, which we'll talk about, the Neighborhood Association, along with the other parties, believed that the MOU would be an additional piece of the puzzle in helping to stop displacement in Fifeville. This agreement is a way to capture the neighborhood's vision for our community, to provide community building, and to hold all parties involved accountable to its commitment to the community. My hope is that in the future, as more development in Fifeville comes about, that we as an association can form more partnerships with whatever businesses and organizations to do whatever we can to make sure that all of our visions in the small area plan are met to benefit the community and stay true to our residents.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
what she's talking about there, and this is something that I definitely want Sarah to talk about, because Sarah played a huge role in this along with Miss Carmelita. The site we've been talking about is the old Estes IGA, right? That's the 501 Cherry Avenue project. It's right across from Tonsler Park. It's right next to La Flor Michoacana, Paleta Shop, which now I'm hungry. But it's right there, right? And that's such a busy corridor. People drive by it all the time. And that grocery store, that building was once such a hub of community for the Fifeville neighborhood, from what I've heard from plenty of folks, from, Miss Marcia, Miss Durenda, all the way down to Tron Jackson, who's 19 years old, and told me about his memories of going there with his grandma. So it's, it was such a staple. So that's the area that we're talking about. And what we're talking about is a Sunshine Set, a multi-use development with, fingers crossed, a grocery store, music resource center, and twice as nice, with apartments on the 2 floors above those. So, the project has come together with the efforts of, Woodard Properties owns that property.
Okay.
And they already had a relationship with the Neighborhood Association from working on the Fifeville Trail project, which wrapped up about a year ago. So they had already been chatting a lot with Carmelita and Sarah and other folks in the neighborhood. And then they were trying to kind of reach an agreement. Like, the Neighborhood Association was, trying to stand up and say, hey, we know that you own this now. Can we do something good for the neighborhood with this? Like, the association was trying to give the neighborhood a say, and Woodard was like, yeah, let's do it. So they've been working on this kind of plan, but then they couldn't figure out a housing part. And that's how PHA got involved. But
makes sense.
They've entered into this agreement called are you ready? Memorandum of Understanding, Community Benefits Agreement, MOU, CBA. The agreement is what I would call it. But
the agreement.
Sarah's the one who brought this idea to everyone, because Sarah's a certified planner. So she's got background in this. She's also very modest and would not take credit for this, but everyone told me it was Sarah's idea to do this type of agreement. So she had heard about this and brought it up. And Sarah, I think you could tell us kind of from there how that developed, because this agreement, I talked to the guy who did the Staples Center, one of these, where the Lakers play and everything. Yeah. And he was like, yeah, these things happen with a real estate, private developer agreeing to give a neighborhood a say happens a couple of times a year in the entire country. So this is rare. not just for Charlottesville, but for anywhere in the US. And it's happening in Fifeville. They've signed this agreement. It's Woodard, the private developer,
Right.
PHA, nonprofit developer, and the neighborhood association. So Sarah can tell us a little more about that kind of agreement.
Yeah, and Sarah, before you do that too, tell us the makeup of the neighborhood association.
The makeup of the neighborhood association?
Yeah, as far as people, you know what I mean? Because I'm curious about that. Yeah, what the leadership, is it truly representative of the spectrum that's of the neighborhood?
Yeah, so that's a great question. We're a very small group. In the time that I've been attending the neighborhood association meetings since about 2015, it's been about half and half, African American and white folks attending, and it's mostly most of the time it's seniors attending. I'm one of the younger folks who attends. I'm 39, and so we do have a couple of younger folks who come every now and then. But I would say, in terms of being representative of neighborhood demographics, we're probably a little bit underrepresented on African American participants. And there's a longer story looking back that I'd be happy to chat about on another show. Because the neighborhood association did used to be a Black-led, Black-dominated neighborhood association. Okay. And so that's been a shift. And my knowledge of that shift only goes back to about 2015, but it certainly is a part of the story of power dynamics in the city of Charlottesville. And that's a big piece of what we've been thinking about as a neighborhood association and as a leadership, is trying to bring back the power to community voice, particularly the historic and generational families in the community, as well as the young people who you can imagine not many young people come to a neighborhood association meeting, but we want to make sure that their voices are included too, in terms of assessing what's needed in the community and sharing their vision for how they think those needs could be met.
Got you. Now, if you all don't mind, since we're up against the hour, can we take a quick break and then we'll come back and you can share your thoughts on the MOU, and then make sure that Sunshine and Aaron have, sort of to make sure that you all close this with what you think is most pertinent today, and we'll see what Max has as well. So since we're up against the hour, we're going to take a quick break and come right back with Sarah of the Fifeville Neighborhood Association, Sunshine of the Piedmont Housing Alliance, and Aaron, Charlottesville Tomorrow. Sir Charles is Miss Max. Stay tuned. We're talking Cherry Ave, Fifeville. All right, family.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, Black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More Black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that, and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in this city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further. and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor. Back like we never left. Sir Charles, Miss Max, joined by none other than our family from Charlottesville Tomorrow, Aaron O'Hare, and Sunshine Mathon of Piedmont Housing Alliance, Sarah Malpass of Fifeville Neighborhood Association, talking about the development in Fifeville neighborhood on Cherry Avenue. And for those of us from here, talking about the old IGA. All right, let's make it clear. And
Why just say that at first?
Yeah.
and I was trying to be professional, but so where we left off, we wanted to come back because the hour just wasn't quite enough. We wanted to make sure that everybody had their closing comments, what folks need to know moving forward. And as we said, we will have residents on with us talking from both sides, and we want to have city leaders and folks on as well when it comes to with the overarching view looks for for this landscape, what that means to the city. So Sarah, I want to go back to you because we had a question during the break. Also, you were going to touch on what the MOU means that Aaron introduced, but so yes, you could tackle either one in order you choose, the question or the MOU.
Great. Well, I'll start with this. This is a great question from one of the viewers or listeners today. They asked what would be a good number of Black folks for adequate representation in the neighborhood association. I think it's a great question. It's one we've struggled with since I've been a part of the neighborhood association. And to some extent, I think it really depends on what you're looking for in terms of representation or what you think representation means. So if you look at the current demographics of the neighborhood, it's 55% African American. And so if that's your standard for representation, then we should have a little over half of our members who are Black. But I think for me,
is it the case when the majority of, it sounds like anyway, that the majority of the Black people that live in that neighborhood are renting?
Well, we don't know if they're renters or I haven't dug that deep.
Okay.
Into the,
Okay.
Yeah, I think we do have a majority renters, but Aaron hasn't analyzed that by race. But what was your question? Could you restate that?
Oh no, was it my question or Max's question?
Well, we don't have.
Oh, Max. Sorry, I thought Max was asking a question.
Oh yeah, so you answered it, because she was saying that we would need the rest of that data.
Yeah, but so to go back to the representation question, I think another way to look at representation is to think about power dynamics. And to think about who built a neighborhood. And so for me personally, I think given the history of the neighborhood and the Black leadership that really built the core of the community and the Black leadership that continues to lead today, that we ideally would have higher representation than we do in our Thursday night meetings. I would say that we're close to 50-50, depending on which night folks choose to show up. But I'd like to see it go higher. And to that extent, the community, the neighborhood association has done a lot of thinking about how do we make sure if it's not convenient for folks or they don't want to come on Thursday nights, how do we get out and make sure that the neighborhood association is gathering opinions and insights directly from our residents to make sure that what we are pushing for and what we are advocating for really reflects those perspectives. And so we have for years, when we have done our key decision-making around vision for the neighborhood, around where the neighborhood association puts our time and energy, we go out into the community. We go to places like the mosque, like Abundant Life. We do front porch conversations. And so that's a way that we have sought to really try to acknowledge that disparity and address and make sure that the things that we are pushing for are truly representative and coming from the plethora, the diversity of neighborhood residents that we have.
Yeah, and I just want to reiterate because it's crucial. And Sarah, full transparency, like I see it so many times. And thank you for the good work that you're doing. But so many times, especially when you talk about the younger Black demographic that doesn't appear to be present when it comes to a lot of the action that's taking place for representation within the neighborhood association. It happens so many times, but I understand to a certain extent because a lot of us are jaded. Like a lot of us have trauma from the past that makes us believe that things are just going to be what they are. There's no way I can change it, or things are going to get worse because we don't have the economic power, whatever the case is. But like I feel I always do, I'm calling out to my kinfolk, to my people in particular, to say that you have to be present. We have to be present. And I mean, because the only other choice is you giving up hope. You can't give up hope. You got to believe that future generations, current generation is a new generation doing it a new way. And we got to form these bonds and these unions to leave things better and to have a voice and a say. Because I hear you talking about the seniors, which is great. And I hear you talking about others, but the seniors, fact of the matter is, they're not going to be here for generations to come. Our elders. So we got to represent if we want stake in our communities.
hmm And I'm just wondering about the assessment of whether or not the feedback that you do receive from the Black people of the community is actually being incorporated into the various projects or initiatives that you all are working on, because that matters. If they feel like their voice is going to go unheard or it won't be worthwhile anyway, then a person has to weigh, is it worth my time?
Yeah, thank you. That's at the heart of the work that we are trying to do with the Neighborhood Association. We started in 2015 doing community surveys soon after the hotel broke ground on Cherry Avenue. We knew folks were really upset and worried about displacement in the community, worried about the future of services like the laundromat on Cherry Avenue. And so we went door to door through the neighborhood with that survey, and ultimately came up with a vision that we put together that was really reflective of all of the feedback that we got. I live on the Prospect side of the neighborhood, and so I went door to door in our side of the neighborhood, which is composed of a variety of folks, from homeowners to renters to folks who have subsidized housing in what's currently called Greenstone. But we really worked to put together a vision that was reflective of that input and reflective of the history of African-American leadership building the neighborhood. So the vision that we have for the community is that it's a vibrant mixed-use area on Cherry Avenue, and that development on Cherry Avenue will respect and preserve the history and culture of the neighborhood, specifically that African-American history and culture. And that new development and investment that comes on Cherry Avenue and throughout the neighborhood would be something that contributes to a sense of community rather than pushing people apart, brings folks together, and is accessible and welcoming to folks at all ends of the socioeconomic spectrum, but particularly to folks who are at the lowest end. There has really been a heart in this community for making sure that there is a place for everyone to live. And so that's a vision that we put together with input from folks across the neighborhood, and that we took to the city through their small area planning process that we did. That vision got adopted by the city in 2021. And that's the standard which developers like Woodard Properties have to meet when they come into our community. Right. And so that's what led us into a conversation ultimately with Woodard Properties about putting together a community benefits agreement. We wanted to make sure that there was a written agreement where the community had the power to express what we needed and what would be meaningful to us in terms of development at that site.
Gotcha. Now, the MOU, did you have any other thoughts on the MOU, or are we good there? We covered that.
I can just share that it's a, oh, I'm sorry, did you mean me?
Yeah, oh yes. If you have anything to add. Yeah.
Yeah, I can just share that it's a tool that's used in development projects across the country. Usually, as Aaron said, it's used at really large development projects. I had some experience working to support one. Back in 2019, I worked with a community group that was majority people of color, and they were advocating for anti-displacement measures around the Port of Seattle. And so I had experience working to support a community group advocating for themselves in that kind of process at work. And I wanted to see if we could use that to be a meaningful tool here in Charlottesville. And so when Anthony Woodard and Woodard Properties came to us and shared that they had purchased the site, we knew that this was one of the critical sites in the neighborhood. It's a site that has incredible emotional and historic resonance for folks in terms of just being the place that families used to go to get their groceries, to see and be seen, and to be a part of the community. And so for us, that particular site was really important to make sure the developer got it right. And we were lucky that we had a relationship with the developer who purchased that property, and that they were, in fact, really willing and eager to work with us.
Gotcha. Thank you. And as we kind of loop back around, Sarah, anything that you wanted to leave with our listeners when it comes to maybe ask of the community from the Fifield Neighborhood Association, or any last comments?
Thanks. Well, I'll just mention that we focused a lot on housing in this conversation, but the community benefits agreement is really quite a bit more broad than housing. We have economic development aspects to the agreement. We have things related to the community's history and culture. And so we're really hoping that holistically, this development will be a process where folks can really see themselves represented. And to that end, I guess my ask would be our next Fifeville Neighborhood Association meeting is December 14th. That's a Thursday. We meet the second Thursday every month at the Tonsler Park Community Center. Our meetings start at 6:15. And this particular month, we are having a design session. Folks from Woodard Properties, from Piedmont Housing Alliance, and from the architect firm that they're working with will be there. It'll be our third of 3 design meetings. So members of the community have already been coming out and getting involved and having a say in what they would like the building to look like, how they would like it to feel, and integrate into the surrounding properties and neighborhood. But we really hope that folks will come out on Thursday, December 14th at 6:15 p.m. for our third conversation with the developers, and that's at Tonsler Park. So I hope to see you guys there.
Thank you. Thank y'all for scheduling at a decent time and not just times where, like the people involved and the seniors can meet, because people will be trying to sneak that on you. Y'all know they do.
They do, and we meet every month. So come on out, whether it's this coming December meeting or starting in the new year. We'd love to see you.
Mm-hmm. Some listeners may be interested, and I don't know if you were releasing this information, but the name of the particular developer that you all have decided to go with on this project. So I guess that's my first question. The next is, Erin alluded to it. Well, she's mentioned it earlier in the interview, and in your recent comments, it sounds like the design of the project is still ongoing. And so I guess I'm just wondering whether or not there are any things that might prohibit the project from fully becoming what you guys envision for it being in terms of the number of units, et cetera, et cetera. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing is, I'm sure this project would then have to go before the Planning Commission and ultimately City Council to then even be approved. So there's a few, I know we're talking about what it's going to be, but I guess there's a few hurdles that we still have yet to jump before we see what it actually becomes or is.
I'm sure Sunshine has something to add to that too. And you may as well, Sarah, but that may be a good nod to Sunshine.
Well, I'll start on the last question there. So some of that approval stuff has already taken place. So in fact, it already has been in front of Planning Commission and City Council and has gotten the rezoning that it needs to move forward. But there is, this gets at the second question, which is what do we still need to see this project happen? And frankly, it's this is the nonprofit developer in me, but we need the funding. Like, we can't do this without the subsidy to reach those depths of affordability. And those decisions have not been made yet. We've made good progress in conversations with city staff and city leadership. And they are nodding in the right direction, but no final decisions have been made yet. And that's a key area where we need everyone's voice to lift up and support the funding that's necessary to make the project happen.
Awesome.
And that city funding, sorry, last thing, Charles. That city funding is not the funding for the entire project. That's a key, but it's a key part of the funding. That funding leverages all the other state and federal sources that come in. They want to see the local investment first, and then that opens up everything else.
And I think Max's first question was, what developer you're working with, right? We didn't, that was the other question.
Yeah, I'll just respond quickly and Sarah jump in. But it's actually, the property is owned by Woodard Properties. They are the owner. There's actually, the neighborhood doesn't have any say in that. We don't have any say in that. They own the property. So they're the for-profit entity engaged, and then they've engaged with us at Piedmont Housing Alliance to be the nonprofit affordable housing developer. Those are the two developer organizations involved.
Gotcha.
The BRW is the architect.
That's correct.
Okay, yeah, maybe that's the question in architect. Okay.
And I think something that Sarah touched on a little bit about the agreement is it really is so much more than just the, like, this is how many units of housing and this is how affordable they'll be. And the story that I wrote on the agreement is quite long, but I think because there's so much there, it is hopefully worth a read for folks on the Charlottesville Tomorrow site. But it includes things like, Woodard and PHA will hire from the neighborhood whenever they can for these projects, for staff, for those sorts of things. So, and that's just one of many, many, many things that's in there. It involves the level of community engagement that they have to have. It's not just, like you're it's not just one meeting and done. It's ongoing. It's multiple design meetings. It's all of that. So
We've seen that go wrong.
well, exactly. We sure
Yes.
have, which is why like it's so unique that it's for Charlottesville, that it's written down in the agreement. And like if Woodard or PHA doesn't do it, like not only the neighborhood association, but everyone in the public, because it's a public document now, it's in the city council packet. They could be like, excuse me, hey, remember you said this. Like the accountability that the agreement brings to the project is really unprecedented for a private developer, especially in Charlottesville. So it's super interesting. I would if people have some chunks of time, I would encourage them to read this story. It's, could get some ideas cooking, as city manager Sam Sanders kind of brought up in that housing conversation. People are looking at it.
Yeah. Cultural competency, is something that at every level, association, the alliance, the property owners, the developer, the architect, keep on going down the line, like that has to constantly be the push, be the expectation of that you're going to have cultural competency. Yeah. Because without that, then like there's always ways to work. There's always loopholes to find to get over on people if their history is not known and appreciated. But
true.
Yeah.
So true.
So
accountability.
So so as we said, thank you for pitching it in the beginning. We're gonna have another Can I Talk to You Seville series come up last Thursday of January. So y'all stay tuned for that. But want to thank Sarah and Sunshine as well for joining us today. Always a pleasure. Sunshine, Sarah, nice to meet you. And so Aaron, maybe give you the last words in regards to make sure that you close out this section of the story and let folks know, kind of what to expect next in this conversation.
Sure. So thank you again also to Sarah, to Sunshine, and to Carmelita for taking the time to type this up. She's always on the go. Everyone wants her time. So I'm grateful that she took the time to do that and to talk to me for the story as well. So I would just encourage folks who are curious. You don't have to read it all at once. You can read it in chunks, to go online to sevilletomorrow.org to find the story. Fifeville residents got a say in a private developer's plans by making an unusual agreement. Goes through a lot of history. The residents' perspectives are so crucial to this. So we will have them on in a future episode, along with some city leaders who could talk big picture about what can Charlottesville learn from this, and how could it or not be a model going forward? I think that's a really complicated question that I try to answer in the story. But one thing that was great about this for me from an equity kind of community-based reporting standpoint is to have all of those perspectives in there, to talk to the neighborhood, to talk to the people who are being affected, who are most affected, as well as the folks making the decisions. And it's nice when those two groups kind of dovetail, right?
That's right.
So the power of the neighborhood is something that I really wanted to emphasize in this, because folks are speaking out. It's not just the neighborhood association. It's people going to the meetings and saying, here's my experience. This is my perspective. This is what I want. This is what I don't want. And there's been a lot of that. So it's really exciting to see people exercise their voices in that way. So, and then keep, you can subscribe to our newsletter to get more, because this will not be the last story I write about this. Poor Sarah and Sunshine are going to have to talk to me many more times after this, not just about this project, but thanks to the dozen plus people I talked to for the story. And I'm looking forward to the next segments.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Aaron. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, thank you too.
Want to take us to break, Miss Max?
Enough said, really. Appreciate you all. Keep doing what you're doing. We'll be right back after this. Stay tuned.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
I to the Ism, H to the Izzo talk show on Charlottesville's #1 for hip hop and R&B classics, 101 Jams. Sir Charles, Miss Max, back like we never left. Tell a friend, tell a friend. IMHO talk show online. So yes, indeed, Miss Max. You ready for this?
I'm ready.
You ready to embarrass our children by asking an expert what we do with these kids?
Help us, please.
So we are joined by none other than my brother Freddie Jackson of Love No Ego. Mr. Love No Ego, happy Sunday afternoon.
Hey, happy Sunday, guys. Thanks for having me.
Yes, indeed, man. Anytime. You know, man, like we have different resources in town. Some folks aren't as aware of. And the beauty that I see in that too is that like it's a variety out here. And so many times we need to still figure out how we like congregate such things so that we can affect the whole change, the entire change, you know. But something I appreciate about you, and I want you to present to some and introduce to others, Love No Ego, the foundation, because you're not a respected person when it comes to who you mentor. So definitely can appreciate that. And so yeah, like let's start right there. Like I said, present to some, introduce to others, the Love No Ego Foundation.
Yeah, absolutely. And to commend you or further elaborate on what you said about, you made me think about what I do in the brand and the lane, and we all have these different resources. You know, it truly takes the village, man. Like it truly does. Like I can be so passionate about my mission, but I still need you. I still need other resources because, you know, there's millions of kids, you know, to be impacted, and our kids in our community, they all have different interests, different passions. You can reach them a better way, perhaps, than I can, but collectively we can make that change, you know? So,
that's right.
But Love No Ego, you know, working with the youth and young adults, ages 10 to 24, just helping them live more humanly, man, like igniting that natural human love space that they have, that natural intuition, while being aware of the egotistical influences and the peer pressures and all the unfortunate things that come at them that promote that fear, promote that division, separation, you know. So we want to help, in a nutshell, we want to help lead them to purpose. Because once they have purpose, man, like they take off, you know. And so we want to implement our curriculum, share ways with them how to look more inward than they look outward. You know, depending on that outside world is very, very, it's temporary, you know, it's materialistic, and it doesn't provide the purpose and the inspiration and foundation within that's not easily shaken by the noise and the chaos. So we can help them develop that foundation within and move forward with that, connect them to the resources that they're interested in, their goals, their desires, but they take off running with this Love No Ego message, you know, and have that foundation. So we go into all the schools, we do full-on assemblies and presentations, try to boost the morale of their whole environment, right? And we follow that up with in the classroom workshops. Like we'll come back and have lunch, we'll come back and do a cereal buffet with them.
Okay.
And the cereal buffet is all about sharing similarities and celebrating differences. So it's all about diversity. Like we treat the cereals like different walks of life. We're all different shapes, different colors, different sizes. But we're in this bowl/world together. So how do we make this thing work? You know? We have our own little creative workshops that we do like that.
But so I'm normally a Frosted Flake man. So what does that mean about me?
So you know what
tell me
we'll
something
do
about
with you.
myself.
So this is what we'll do with you. You'll come in, right? And you'll fill out a little 5-question thing. And 2 of those questions are, what's your favorite cereal and what's your least favorite cereal? And we have all the cereals there, man, from the cheap old $2 Honey Smacks to the $13 box of organic Gashi, right? Kashi, right? So we're going to take one of the exercises that we do. We're going to take your favorite, that Frosted Flake. We're going to take one flake. We're going to put it in a bowl. And then we're going to take your least favorite, whatever you said that was. We're going to dump it on top of it, right? And then we're going to pour your least favorite milk on it, on top of it. And then you're going to have to go in and find your flake. And the whole idea about it, and we have conversations based around it, it's like, you're going to bump up against some things you don't necessarily like in life. You're going to have to deal with some attitudes. You're going to have to deal with some behaviors that really not serving you. But you got to stay focused, and you find your flake.
Yeah.
It's damn sure worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
It's worth the journey when you find your flake.
You find it. Yeah.
So we have this little creative things that we do with them like that in our workshops. We got another workshop, Too Much Media, Not Enough Social. It's like focused on the digital divide and how to use the tool, and don't let the tool use you. You know, like I could pick up these headphones and I throw them at you. Are you going to blame the headphones, or are you going to blame me? Right. So we got to stop blaming tools. Like, it's us, it's human behavior. So we want to get them to see that, so they can kind of become more aware of this, and start taking responsibility and accountability for my purpose and my behavior, and, you know, just come out the gate firing. So with that motivational speaking and boosting morale in the environment, the workshops, we have the mentoring program next, like one-on-one, in-depth collaboration, man. Weekly sessions. We're serving about 15 kids right now, 9 mentors. They usually stay with us 2-3 years, maybe longer. Again, just helping them be their best selves.
Yeah, so it's interesting. Could jump in right here. It's interesting that you say that, because as difficult as it is to help children find their purpose this day and age, you know, with all of the distractions, and you can lump anything that you want to in there, the condition of the world, racism, social media, mental health, family dynamics, all of those things. And not to mention the fact that, you know, you have children who simply, you know, trying to decide what my purpose is like an anomaly. Like, I don't want to make the wrong decision. So is it this? Nah, it's not that. Is it this? Nah, it's not that. So, you know, it's not what you're attempting to do or what you do, right? Is a hard task. Real hard. And so, yeah, I guess you just told us how you kind of the tools that you use to go about helping kids be able to make that decision.
And so, and to kind of come back to you with that, you know, life, we present this message in a way in the curriculum that life is like, and those passions are trial and error. As long as if we teach them how to love what they are doing at this very moment, like, I thought I was going to be best basketball player in the world, right? I thought I was going to be the best music producer in the world, right? But you know what? Because I squeezed that lemon at that time, I got the most juice out of it. So guess what? While playing basketball and being passionate and loving it, guess what I learned? I learned so much about my body. And guess what I've been doing for the last 15 years? Personal training. You know, for the music the music industry. Lived in California, producing, writing ads, doing this and that, right? Had no idea what residual income was. You know,
Till now.
But I wrote, I wrote an ad, I wrote a song 20 years ago that still pays me today. So if I squeeze the lemon and don't be afraid of the trial and error, and I be vulnerable enough to move forward and get this pressure off of me, like I'm supposed to have life figured out today, doesn't work like that. What time is it, right? Look at this. The time is now. And if we can get them in the now, it's a good chance that tomorrow is going to be equally as good or better.
So Freddie, easier said than done, right?
Oh yeah,
easier said than done. And ladies and gentlemen, we are joined by Freddie Jackson of the Love No Ego Foundation, and I like it's so pertinent right now, especially like Max and I both have kids in city schools locally here, and it's like if I had to wrap it up, sum it up, right? Like just based on conversations with young folks as well as adults here. You touched on it. It's like purpose, and you made me think of hope, because in the community, that's a word that I hear even more so. Of if you come from an environment to where your brain has been trained or your eyes have seen things that make you feel hopeless, then what do you have to live for? Like, why would you act right?
Yeah,
if that's your perception of reality. So, like, so when you're dealing with that level of mentality, you got to tell me how you tackle it.
You know, man, we have so many little quirks in our curriculum that we do, right? We always say, we have things that we say. We say life is simple, we make it complex. Life is simple, we make it complex. Stick with me. We have a foundation for success that we do. And in that this is like one of the things that takes place very early on in the mentoring process, right? It's very simple, dude. Like, we have a circle. I'm giving you the condensed version here. In the inside of this circle, I want you to write everything that's natural that you can think of in the universe. Oh, that's one, universe. Everything that you can think of that's natural. And they start to think like, wait a minute, like, natural. Like, life is simple. Let's not make it hard. We make it complex. So in this circle, you have, oh, okay, universe. Do you mean trees? Yeah, that's natural. Sun, moon, stars, dirt, rocks, mountains, clouds. Next thing you know, it gets a little bit deeper. Life, intuition, spirit, peace, joy. It's all natural. And then we have them write everything that they can think of on the outside that's unnatural. Then it gets to phones, cars, shoes, Democrat, Republican, all these subcategories of life, right? And any point in time, we always say, hey, where are you living from? How was your day? What space did you occupy the most so far? It's only 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock. Let's reflect back. Where were you? Like, oh, I got up this morning. I went straight to my phone. Oh, outside. All right, what else you did? I did food outside. When you gonna take some time for you? Because without this inside in this natural space, you wouldn't even be alive.
Right.
And we need to let them kind of know. That's why we do 95% of what we do occurs in nature.
Right.
Because it helps to hone in that message, right? And then we say, okay, well, what are these things for? They're not all necessarily bad. You have some interest. I grabbed basketball, right? I grabbed it. What are you going to grab? Like, dude, I'm from Buckingham County, right? My first basketball court was my bicycle rim nailed on a tree, no nets, no backboard. Fast forward, I'm going to Puerto Rico for basketball tournaments. I'm going, like, how does that happen?
Right.
You know, you got to use the tool, but most often once we come out of the womb, it's on because the performance starts. You just spent 9-10 months in this dark place. It's quiet. You use your senses naturally. You have a heartbeat before you have this big old brain. You think so smart and this and that, right? You come out, doctor slaps you, boom, fluorescent lights in your face, noise, chaos, boom. You move from one box to the next box, the hospital, to the car, to the house, to the room, to the crib. And then this pressure of the society and influence gets on you and saying you need to aspire to do this. You feel pressure. So you do that and you get back in another box, go to your job, your car. And then next thing you know, you got to holding up a help sign. You get a passport and you want to go on vacations. You want to leave. You want to get away. What are you doing? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So if we can wake them up to that, like, look, how many unhappy adults do you know? Because as a kid, you're already happy. Somebody come along and make you unhappy.
That's right.
So as an adult, now it flips. Somebody got to make you happy. You know? So like, look at it. So what happens in the middle of this midlife, or if you want to call it midlife, what happens there? You need to look at that. Remove that programming that's not serving you. Let's put this Love No Ego curriculum right in here, and we're gonna help you grab all these tools of the world. I don't care if you wanted to be the doctor in January and you were super passionate about it. February hit, you like, know what? Forget that. I'm gonna be the next Dr. Martin Luther King. I want to speak. I want to inspire people. Okay, we're gonna help you try to do that. But you know what? It builds a journey of discipline. It builds a journey of purposeful action, even if it's purpose change.
So I hear you saying that the majority of people probably, I guess, are living in this realm of unnatural, right? And at any given time, we can choose to transition into the natural realm of living. And so, again, which ain't easy, right? And all of the things that decisions, mindset, perspectives, what have you, that an individual is living by has connections to other people whom we can't control in terms of being more in our natural realm. So there's going to be some friction, right? Because we're trying to reside in natural and, you know, we're connected to a lot of things that aren't good for us. So practical ways of a kid, a human being transitioning and being able to stay centered in that natural realm of living throughout their life, setting a can't think of the word I want to use, but just making it the norm of living that way.
Kind of creating a little pattern and lifestyle. Take a walk, like in nature, walk on the trail. Just walk, go sit by water. Like it's, we need to understand that it's simple, inevitable. Right? Like it's inevitable and undeniable when it comes to being you. You have to be you. Because you can say God, you can say love, you can say the big tree outside. It's all natural. It's all bliss. But it gave it to you, right? So it's you can't be something that you're not. That's why our phrase is a courage to be you, because we want to give them that courage to be you. So some ways to find that center and being you is honestly, if we got to teach them how to be quiet, how to be still, how to look within first before they look without. Before you start checking all these boxes of the world, recognize the source right here. Like if I say, I love my shoes and I love these material things, we automatically, it's just programming. We skip over the source. We skip over where the recognition comes from in that feeling, in that space. Right?
Yeah.
And being natural is just, it's the, like, if you want to say God, like God gave you life. That's the gift right there. And if we can build gratitude upon that, the outside world becomes some things that you just utilize to push that being forward and to make an impact amongst this world that we've created. We think that's reality. That's stuff that we made. How's that reality?
See, I'm with you. I truly, really am, right? But let me just push back a little bit.
Yeah, come on.
Hypothetical, but not so hypothetical. An example of someone's life. My mom was raped when she was 12 years old. She spent the 10 years of her life in and out of foster care. She turns 18 years old and is homeless and has no place to live. She's on the streets. She gets pregnant by someone that she hardly even knows. He's abusive to her, both verbally and physically. They create a child. That's me. Mom can't get a job to take care of me. So, there's often times that I go hungry. I steal to make sure that my belly is full. I got siblings that, I got to try to help take care of. We're not getting the nurturing and guidance and direction that we need in our life. Mom has works long hours for pennies, and at the end of the day, there's still not enough money to make ends meet. We have no vehicle. We have no family support. We live in a neighborhood where bullets come through our doors or windows or walls, right? I wear dirty clothes to school. The only people that embrace me is the dope boy down the street. I need to help my mom. I got siblings in the house, so let me do what I got to do to make it happen. You want me to live where? What's a natural realm? What we talking about right now?
Well,
how am I supposed to do it? You want me to go sit by some water?
Yeah.
Because while I could be doing that, I can go sell this and that.
Yeah.
And get some food to take home to my siblings.
Right. Well, this is what I would do. Right. This is what we do. We still gonna get it's not your fault. This little girl. It's not your fault. But guess what? This life of yours is your responsibility.
Okay.
It's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. We're going to support you. We're going to give you this Love No Ego Foundation curriculum.
Okay.
We're going to build it. We're going to see the community, our pillar, spirituality, education, exercise, community. Spirituality, education, exercise, community. She going to get the spirit spoken to and the purpose somewhat directional for her, right? Through Love No Ego. She going to get some exercise. Because we move. And I can talk about the benefits of that. I've been a trainer for 15 years on another whole show. But education, community. that's where the resources we're going to connect her to that she needs for the food, for the dirty clothes, maybe for the abuse. We take them to the resources if we have to. That's part of the mentoring process. Meanwhile, she has to stay true. We have to do 2-3 sessions a week because this is intense. And she's going to need some serious reprogramming. And especially when they are still consistently in that environment.
In the environment. I was thinking that. Yeah.
You know? So what's going to happen from that? We're not sure. But we've had situations like that. And we've had some great success stories from it. I'm talking like, suicidal any day now, any moment. There was one time where there wasn't even time to get the paperwork in. Like I just had to go. Luckily it was me, and I didn't have, and another mentor kind of didn't get it because I took off. I went, picked the kid up, and we started that day. Right. But my point is that we want to give, we're gonna still practice reaching this natural space for yours, because it's highly important, because you're gonna have to develop something and some perseverance and some resiliency that can kick off of that programming and not pull you back into those slummy parts that's not serving you. So we're gonna do that, and we're gonna consistently do that. But simultaneously, we got to connect you with some resources right away that can be supportive, and we'll take you there if we need to. And we say we try to allow love to do what it does for you.
Thank you. We are joined by Freddie Jackson of Love No Ego, the foundation. Freddie, I mean, so far it's been an enriching conversation. I know our listeners are appreciative, like not only about the good word, the inspiration that's coming, but to get a better understanding of what it is you do. So that's why I definitely want to make sure that we don't miss the opportunity for folks to know how they get involved, ways they can reach out. What do you need from us?
Yeah, we need new, not necessarily new, but just supportive. We're trying to build a team, so we need additional board members. We need advisory team that we have. It's kind of dwindled a little bit down from 4 to actually 2. We need more mentors. We need to make more impact. We need to make. There's a waiting list right now because we have all these partnerships with Department of Social Services, Buckingham, Fluvanna, Charlottesville, Albemarle, Greene County, across the mountain, Waynesboro, Stanton. And there are a lot of kids. I mean, just here, before you even get outside of Charlottesville, like there are a lot of kids that need support. So we need mentors. We need volunteers. We need people to step up and come in and say, what can I do? And we'll place you where you can be the most effective. That means on the board. If that means volunteering, if you have a desire to become a Love No Ego mentor, we have our in-house training. We have some external training. We do trauma-informed care training. We do a lot of training to make sure that we are able to serve these kids to the best of our ability. But check us out, lovenoego.org. You can send me an email, Freddie@lovenoego.org, Freddie with the Y, 2 Ds. But if you go to the website, and hit the contact button and fish around a little bit, you'll see all the ways to reach out to us.
Gotcha. Definitely an informative website. And as I'm hearing you talk to, I got to imagine that this curriculum, it's hard to do group mentoring, right? It's almost like sometimes you need to identify a mentor for a mentee. Would that be accurate?
Yeah. Because we match, based on the goals and the service plans and the needs and the trauma. That's if it applies. But we do group sessions as well. We try to do them at least 6 times a year. So every other month, all the mentors bring their kids out, and we might go into Blue Ridge and do a big hike together. Have some Love No Ego activities.
Are you doing these type of programs with city schools?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we haven't touched, unfortunately, we haven't touched the high school yet. you know. And speaking of the high school,
We need you.
yeah,
we need you.
We've had kids in our program, in the mentoring program. I mean, that flourished big time, like big time. One of our favorite kids went to Charlottesville High. And when he came in, he was a sophomore. Dark. He was dark. When I met him, he was just like looking at me like, what you think you gonna do for me, dude? You know? And now he's volunteering. He's speaking at our golf tournaments. He's turning down jobs. You know what I mean? He's flossing like purposefully. And that just, that just gives me goosebumps because that's why we do it.
Yeah, and I'm glad Miss Max brought that up too, because I'm sure there's some people listening saying, well, man, it's like, CHS is already calling me saying that I need to get in there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I'm sure people are listening, like trying to prioritize like where they put their resources. Because, especially when you're talking to volunteering route, everybody knows it's needed, but also most people are short on time. So I'm glad Miss Max asked that because, like for the listener that's trying to make that decision to see how what you do can relate to, like to an issue that's already at hand. And then, so them feeling like I can address it through this. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely, man. And, we have a person on the ground, community connector, Wendy, who reaches out to all the schools and tries to bring the message there. And, something new that has started over the last 2 years was bringing it to the corporate world. So I go and speak at school boards, annual conferences, and talk about the curriculum and treat it as if we have to have this heart-led engagement in leadership, because that's where we can connect first, with each other and the people that we're trying to serve.
Right.
The curriculum, it is what it is. That might suck, but okay. But how can we keep our wits about each other, serve the kids, do our job that we're here to do, that we signed up for, and truly just make connections? It's difficult, but that's the most important thing.
Yeah. And what stands out about this too, people would be surprised of like how many folks, particularly children, who like city or like urban areas are all they know. Maybe never seen nature to the extent that you're talking about, and how opening, how eye-opening, like how that opens your chakras.
Yeah,
like just to be in tune with nature if you've never experienced it.
And what's so funny, man? Like we're talking, and that thing I said a little while ago about it's inevitable. Like this is what you come from. This is what make up your human spirit and body, right? This is what makes you up.
Yeah.
This is so. Why do we like have these pull-offs on the side of the road on 64?
Right.
Like people, it's always packed. You don't even question. You pull over and you just stop, you go over there and you look. Right? It feels good to take a shower. Water coming over your body. Your body's already 75% water. And when you can kind of match that rhythm, what's the word I'm trying to say? If you can almost kind of match that flow with the water coming over you, like it's peaceful. You ever notice how good thoughts come to you maybe in the shower? Maybe you're sitting on the passenger side.
Yeah.
Just kind of looking out the window. You know why they come? Like think about it. You made the space for it to come.
Yeah. I mean, I was gonna say the toilet, but I didn't want to be inappropriate.
The toilet, whatever it is.
I'm sorry, Max. I'm sorry. I had to do it.
You're taking lessons from Razor. Come on now.
I'm sorry.
But having them and teaching them that, like having them like kind of notice these little pieces about just the spirit of just kind of being human. We walk through, we have silent moments, like silent movement meditation. We just walk. We don't say nothing. We just listen. But just kind of getting to that practice of like seeing that and showing and helping them learn, like, yeah, this is a supernatural thing.
Yeah.
And this world that we've created and all this stuff I'm trying to attain and all the fear and the pressure and all that comes from, it's really kind of bullshit. It's really like, it's just kind of bullshit that we made up.
The only thing I want to point out too is that it's not entirely your responsibility to reach out to the schools, because if we're really trying to help these kids the way that we say we're trying to help these kids, then we are turning over every rock. So Yeah. Just want to
Yeah.
put that out there.
Miss
Yeah.
Max, while you got the mic, thank you, Freddie. But I'm gonna let the Queen close us in her fashion.
Come on, Queen.
Yeah, yes, I like that. Look, I want to thank Freddie for sharing his some time with us on Sunday. Thank you for what you do. Keep doing what you do. And it's good to see, always a friendly face to see you in the community. And happy about your work. Happy about the contribution that you're making to the universe or to individuals' lives. So thank you for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Love you guys. Thanks for having me.
Yep. All right, we'll be right back. Stay with us.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
We live in a society in which structural racism is a very real thing. We are all dealing with that in every aspect of our lives, and the media is a reflection of our community.
Historically, black people have been portrayed a certain way in the media to justify normative assumptions around political and social issues.
More black people behind the cameras, in front of the cameras, more producers, more people of color producing, so they can go and get the content that's needed so they can highlight our attributes.
I've been in this industry for 15 years, and I've seen firsthand how our voices just aren't heard. Even if you're in the newsroom, sometimes you get completely ignored and stereotypes are allowed to perpetuate. And one thing we want to do is combat that and also bring information to people so they can be as informed as possible when choices are made in the city, so they can do whatever they can to get their voices heard.
What I believe can be done about the situation is to have more people of color creating news stories, more people who have a interest in and a social consciousness that relates to the stories that they're telling.
Charlottesville Tomorrow looks at these issues. We can present them on IMHO. Vinegar Hill Magazine can take that a step further, and just together we can just make this thing that can be an example of how we can change the media landscape, how we can be more inclusive to get these voices in, to get these people heard. That's just one thing that doesn't happen in so many places, and it's a shame.
We think we live in a society that's very progressive, and we're talking about equity and diversity and inclusion and all these things. Still, the way that black people, and I would say, and I would argue, especially black men, are portrayed by the media is incredibly dangerous, and you've seen the sort of tangible violence that it's led to over the past year.
The community can support the SIM project by first and foremost giving us an opportunity. We understand that it can be difficult to give trust right now, especially considering the current social and political environment. But this project will only be as successful as the community allows it to be. And so we ask you to give us the opportunity to do the work, critique the work, and make sure that we stay aligned with the vision. Another way that the community can get behind the SIM project is through engagement. We want to hear from you. We want to know what you're talking about. We want to put your stories out there. And so whether it's reading the articles written by Charlottesville Tomorrow or Vinegar Hill Magazine, or tuning in to In My Humble Opinion on Sundays on 101.3 Jams from noon to 3 p.m., either way, we want you engaged. We want you to be part of this. The community can also support the SIM project through funding. To learn more about how to support SIM, you can visit our website. Thank you for your support.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis. Only on 101.3 Jams.
I was trying to pace myself in that last one because I knew that we had a great man coming up. And, you know, I'm gonna try to make him blush, Max, because I know this brother. I'm trying to make him blush. A great man, like, you know, when it comes to communication. This brother that we have with us right now is somebody that I don't even know if I've ever told him, but like he's someone who has made me like re-examine myself multiple times and be honest with myself and my style of communication. Everything from my business prowess, you know, to how I network with people and work. And actually, I remember him saying he doesn't like the word network. So let me not say that. Like, but how I work with people, how I, you know, extend resource. And so, like, and it just blows my mind that we haven't really had him on here for a full segment until today. I'm talking about none other than Joshua Renee, founder and CEO of Spillteem. Joshua, man, thank you for joining us. Happy Sunday afternoon to you.
Yeah, man, I'm grateful. I did blush a little bit. I turned a little red. There's a little red undertone going on. Absolutely, no, I appreciate it, man. I'm humbled. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. So, so I know you have a lot of things going on, like normal, your initiatives, and we definitely want to get into those. I know in particular, you have a series called Human right now, but it's birthed out of the think tank that is Spillteem. And so go ahead, we have to start right there because when people hear the word Spillteem, it's not a term that you like that I think is in our normal vernacular.
Yeah.
So go ahead and break down, Joshua Renee, like what made you find, or you know, what inspired the foundation of Spillteem and all that it does.
Yeah. I'll do that, and I'll give an example of why even the name Spillteem. You know, I've come from a pretty big just background. I mean, my own personal life that I've lived has not been the most like cookie cutter privileged life you could probably ever imagine. I've seen brokenness a lot inside of like organizations, inside of you know, institutions, inside of systems. But at the end of the day, like those are all made up of people. Right. And so I was looking at why do we continue the cycle of either broken systems or broken processes or brokenness in a sense? Why do we just continue that? And so I realized just my background of like human services, business, all that good stuff, and psychology, that there needed to be, so I knew that I would do a better job serving organizations and people from the outside versus the inside. That I would get a little more freedoms to do that. So the example of like Spillteem, what I often say is what that means is like if we were having coffee and there was a waiter or waitress that came in and was filling up your coffee cup, and they got to that like top of that cup, and you're like, whoa. And we were engaged in a conversation, but you looked over and it started like getting crazy. And you're like, whoa, stop for a second. That waiter or waitress passed a point of safety. And suddenly now you gotta do like one of the walk and sip things, or you gotta like, you know, make sure the table's not bumped or you're screwed. But we said, whoa, stop for a second. We would have much rather that person stop at a place that just in case it got bumped or just in case we could not do the walk and sip. And that's a place of safety, right? And that happens also in our thinking, is that we'll get filled up just enough though. Just enough, because then we have that just in case. But if she was pouring in money, would he have said, whoa, stop for a second? Suddenly there's no safety margin. Right? Not at all. So she's putting in money and suddenly there's no safety margin. But it's interesting that we can determine, right, what gets filled up. And the difference was that what we saw in the money situation, it was a different level of value. So suddenly when the value is poured into the way that we think, there's suddenly no safety margin. We'll just go anywhere. But when it requires us to change and challenge, we stop. When we have to either change or be challenged to a particular place, we say, whoa, stop for a second. That's good enough. And so Spillteem is designed to do that, man. It lives in that safety margin place and going into like organizations, go in there and work with the people stuff. Although process is important, it's people first, process second. And we live in that space of that, whoa, stop for a second. That like safety margin that keeps us all just from like going to where we actually need to go and be who we need to be. It's this limited thing that's, and you can't see it, but it's this invisible psychological mental wall or ceiling that is there, and we just kind of go in and help break that a little bit. Yeah.
So it's funny that you said what you said too, because when we were just talking to Freddie from Love No Ego, he was talking about how the tools like sometimes control us. Like instead of focusing on the nature, like we're focusing on the tools that nature has given us.
Yeah.
When forgetting that's just a tool. You know what I mean? And that's like I hear that in what you're saying. But you also said something. It sounds like one of your pillars or approaches is people first, process second.
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So, like we're all business people here as well. Like we all run households, we all have some complex relationships. So the list goes on and on. So when you have an end result, right? How do you approach it from the frame of mind of people first?
Yeah.
Because when I hear say people first, like I feel like that's a personality trait that unfortunately too many of us do not have.
Yeah.
Like, to say the golden rule, right? Treat others as you want to be treated kind of thing. It's like, if I know what the end goal is, then I'm sort of keeping my eye on that prize and saying, what do I need to do to get to that money or to get to that end goal? Forgetting about the people in the past, unless I can use them to get to that goal.
Yeah.
And is it possible to be people first in everything?
Yeah. So I have to believe that, right? I have to believe that this room that we're in is nothing without us in it. Right. And so going to what you were saying is that it is not forgetting that that you need a process, right? Organizations, people, whatever, we have a system, right? Kids, bedtime, 9 o'clock, blah, 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 blah. But it's preparing the child for the 9 o'clock bedtime, right? It's all got to go grocery shopping, the process of grocery shopping. But I have to ensure that I'm making healthy choices and thinking through and blah, blah, blah. It's all the people work first to then kind of do your process. So if we look at a process in our life, our relationships or whatever that's hemmed up, if we slow down enough, we can realize that it's not really the process, right? You think of a broken system, right? Even in a community or whatever it may be. Is the system broken or the individuals that created the system?
Right.
And so we'll often look at the thing, the process as because then we don't take ownership for it. Because it's that thing over there. It's that process over there or that system over there. It's the external work over there. And what we were talking about, offline was that what if the external result you want is determined upon the internal work that you need. And so so we're talking I want a smooth communication. Cool. Does that just happen? Or we have to kind of start to begin the process of how we think and how we function, how we interact, and also how we absorb, as well. And so I think I have to believe that is this world and all the things that are either be systems or whatever that are broken or at the hands of people. There's a really good example, if I could. And it was, I often show when we're doing some talks, and it's regarding Google, and it was 2015. And, I do want to kind of preface, might be a little bit of a trigger warning in some of this, but Google launched their facial recognition software in 2015. And this recognition software recognized bikes as bikes, recognized cars as cars, graduation as graduation. And one of the things that it recognized, and you can look this up, is that it recognized African-American people, Black people as gorillas.
Wow.
And it was, and often when I sit in the room and I talk about this, I use this case study and I ask the room, how did this happen? How did this happen? And because Google, you can look at the reviews and they started, the messaging and the news headings, and they started to talk about the tech and the analytics, and they talked about the code. But didn't someone write that code?
Yeah.
Wasn't there a room full of people that thought this up? And so what's really cool is that it opens up a conversation where people start to talk about there were certain people that weren't in the room that needed to be there, certain demographics that needed to be included, certain questions that needed to be asked. Then when you had all of those individuals in there, the process of rolling out this recognition software might have been a little smoother.
Do you think individuals are just that blind? I'm sorry, Charles. Or naive to not understand that things should be people first? Is that a choice? Is that intentional? Is that unintentional? Are we blinded by something? What that something is?
I think everyone understands it, right? Like, so what we were kind of saying is that for this radio station, I love it's that it leans in the truth and it leans in the honesty and the integrity of the things that need to be said. But that comes from a place of values, right? Prioritized values. It comes from a place of, if we operate outside of these values, we would be joining some sort of system, right? Some sort of easy fluid. I think people are very much aware, but it's around prioritized values. We all value the same things, right? Does any of you have animal dog? Dog? That you have a dog? Cool. Cat, right? I don't have any animals, but I value that cruelty to animals is a very bad thing. And especially a cat. But it would hit you a little different. And so that particular, honoring that cat is a little higher on your priority list. For me, it might be number 18. Yours, it might be number 3 that my cat is taken care of, right? And so the reality is we all value the same thing, but we only act out of the top 3 to 5 prioritized values. It's why you see an organization or whatever, maybe you have the beautiful frame on the wall that has those 5 words and says, we're going to think and act out of these, or whatever. So I think it's the prioritization of values. I think we actually all have a lot of very similar values. But some choose that it'll be prioritized and it'll be the ones that convict us to action and thinking. And then some say, I like it, but I have some other ones. So it's going to stay number 28 on my list.
Yeah. And Joshua, just so people know, like for those who may not have heard of you or Spillteem, like you've already worked with some of the biggest brands that we have here in Charlottesville. You know, I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, it's been a good time. We lay low pretty much because we go in and do some heavy work, but we've been able to work with like government, for-profit, nonprofit. We've been able to work with even like some kind of secret entrepreneurs and venture capitalists, and ensuring that as they solve certain problems, that it is people first. Because if not, man, we join in. But we've been able to do some really just impactful work over the past like decade, and it's been beautiful. It's been humbling. It's been awesome. There's been a lot of lives and thinking changed, which has just been super awesome. Because I think it's the people impact. Because they'll change the system, change the process. But thanks for that. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. And in saying that, you also relate, at the human level, not just the business level, but the personal level. And so, in a minute, we're going to get into, this new, I guess, workshop series that you have called Human. Get into that in a second. But kind of staying within the business realm, because Max, one of the things that I want to do too is, while we have Joshua to kind of show the big scope, right, of how communication skills are so important, in every aspect of our life. Because I think, as we were just talking about, mentoring and what our children may need, it's like, you got to remember, sometimes the adults aren't communicating well amongst each other. Then you pass that frustration down to the kids. Then we wonder why the kids aren't communicating what they need and what will make them happy. You know what I'm saying? So, but like I said, before we dig a little deeper in that though, I want your opinion on something. Me being, part of a, I guess you could say, corporation as well, public university, nothing frustrates me more than being in meetings and also
I thought you were going to end there.
Say training. I mean, I could have, right? I could have. but like being in meetings and or say like team building sessions. I know you do a lot of team building. And it's obviously performative. Can't stand it. Because that takes me back to what I said about, it's just not some people's personal makeups. And it's something that Max have said before too. I kind of liken it to diversity training. Like,
right. It's real. It's
like if it's not in your heart,
can
you really respect people's differences if it's not in your spirit? Like somebody trained you into that. You know what I mean?
Man, that's a really good perspective.
Really so I want your take on that, because I try to be a people person, Joshua. I really do. But then I'm in these meetings where it's obvious that people are constantly backbiting and stepping on each other to get what they want.
It's performative, right? It's what's interesting is so my background, like Stanford D School's design school, talks about design thinking, and that was a thing for a while. Now everybody's saying human-centered design, but let's be open and honest. They were honest with themselves. They were saying design thinking and all this cute sexiness, whatever. What's interesting is that design thinking is a series of tools, right? It's a series of like, do this, and you become this. And as I studied it more and more, I was like, man, something's not right though. Like an empathy map is a tool. Let's give an example, right? And I said, all right, so you're saying that if I take someone and I put them through using an empathy map, they become empathetic? I was like, that's what you're telling me. And I was like, I don't know about that, because we can name some political figures or whatever it may be right now. We can name drop and say, if I put that person through an empathy map, you're telling me that they come out empathetic. What it shows is that it's not the tool, right? And I was like, and I knew something had to give. I was like, man, I'm not going to go off in this. Something's broken in my own discipline of design thinking. And I was like, and it was the people part. It was like, you know what? It's working on the individual. So when you hand him then the proper tool, they know what to do with it. So if it is bias training, or if it's some sort of DEI or inclusivity training or equitable training, whatever it may be, that if I don't value, going back to what we talked about, if I don't value equality and you hand me a tool or a method or a process of equitable practices, let me know how that'll work out. Right. One of the quick stories I can give you is that I was sitting on a design thinking panel at an academic institution, and they were like, design thinking. I'm on this panel, Maxine, we love telling the truth, right? So this design thinking squad and panel, and talking to a bunch of students, and we were like, they said, design thinking is the thing. I was like, yeah, series of tools. Everybody agrees. So you have a tool. I was like, how many of you all have a car here? And they raise their hand. We have a car. I was like, oh, that's a luxury at college. I have a car. I said, but when you pull out this stadium, 25 miles an hour. They're like, yep, got it. Speedometer, tool, tell you 25 miles an hour. Just in case that tool doesn't work, there's another tool called speed limit sign, 25 miles an hour, right? So that's another tool. But just in case that tool also doesn't work, there's a police officer there, that is there to design 25 miles an hour. And they're like, yep, it's like these series of tools. And I looked at them, I was like, but yet you still speed. It had nothing to do with the tool and everything to do with I would have to do with your relationship with time. And your relationship with, structure. Then let's hand you the tool of a vehicle and 25 miles an hour, speed limit sign, authoritative, police officer, whatever it may be. And so it is the people, right? It is. So going back to what you were talking about regarding these sessions or these team buildings or whatever it may be, if it's not a prioritized value, then I went through it and you just hope that I'll remember it later. You hope I'll pick it up or whatever it may be, but not that I am inclined to. And that's why I think some of this work, let it be exclusivity work or inclusivity work or equitable work or diverse work or people work, it has to become a prioritized value. We've worked with people as well. Be open and honest. We've worked with a lot of individuals that have taken on this work, but it didn't remain a priority. It didn't remain like a priority in that value system. So then where does it go? And so there is doing the work to ensure that the thing we're leaning toward, the team building, whatever, is actually say to prioritize value. If not, man, it's gone. It's gone. And so then we're in the meeting or in the training to then be in the meeting or the training about the meeting or the training. And then we're doing another meeting or the training about the meeting and the training. And then we're possibly having the meeting after the meeting after the meeting. Says every organization ever. And there's no forward progress.
And you know what it makes me think of? It really, I think a core part to that a lot of times could be short-sightedness. Meaning that again, like you have, so I guess what you can teach and what you can, sort of will somebody into is recognizing the value of putting people first. So if you could touch on that at all, because I think that's what happens is it's like I'm not, speaking as, average person, I'm not going to change the way I think unless you can show me how it's going to benefit me. Especially if I'm, and this is where we get a little deeper, within our community. Especially if I feel like I've been done dirty in the past. And you gonna sit there and tell me to think about somebody else first or think about care how they feel. So how do you portray the value, instead of being short-sighted on sort of, the microwave way of thinking with, the value of people and how that really does benefit.
I often, it reminds me of it's very real. I was sitting on another panel. I was sitting on somewhere, but I was sitting somewhere and we were talking about oppression. And I'm always probably gonna say the thing that upsets people at this point. I've realized that and I've accepted that. And my own personal growth is being okay with not being understood. But I was on this panel and we were talking about oppression. And it was during a lot of times where the world was really, going through it outwardly and externally. And I said, the oppressed also have a job to do, and it was tough. You should have heard the room. What are you talking about? The oppressed are the victims and the oppressed have been oppressed. And there's a hurt, man. And there's a mistrust. And there's a lot going on in an individual that has been oppressed. A lot going on. And so someone decided to entertain my statement and they were like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? What's the role then, since you're saying the oppressed have a job to do in all of this as well? And I said, just don't do it to someone else. If by any chance your trust has been violated, live a life in such a way where you don't violate someone else's. If by any chance you have been manipulated and misguided and lied to, then do your best to live a life in such a way where you don't do that to someone else. And that was the only responsibility I'd ask for the oppressed, those that have been oppressed by a system or by an individual. The only responsibility I asked was that you don't do it to someone else. And I wasn't asking to change the system or change the world, but just change yours. The one that you can influence and touch. Right. And so I do think that the work has to at least start with, I understand that's how other people have lived toward me. but I won't live that way.
And you know, the crazy thing about that is that a lot of times, because I've heard it, like we've had conversations with people on the totally other end of the systematic and racial spectrum than we are, and the oppressor's number one fear is that even though, from my experience, the majority of the oppressed has no intent of like striking back, like they're just focused on taking care of themselves and being treated fairly. But the number one fear of the oppressor a lot of times is the fact of, if I don't continue to oppress you, then you will automatically oppress me.
Sure. And it is, you know, and it becomes this thing where in order for me to be well, then you have to do this for me. It reminds me of like the term psychological safety. And I hear that a lot. And I'm like, sometimes I just want to like judo chop people in the neck when I hear it. But what I've heard and I've seen and I've seen this often, man, this is crazy, from Harvard Business to whatever. And it says that you are responsible for creating a place of psychological safety for me. And that's what it says. Ultimately, it says it for leaders and organizations and all this stuff. You're responsible for creating a place of psychological safety for me. What if, so let's just go into an example of you start to ask questions, right? And it just isn't a really good fluid thing. But what if I'm responsible for creating a place of psychological safety for me?
Right.
What if I'm responsible for that? So then I can turn questions or being questioned into questions, right? And I can actually start to process and function in this world a little bit differently. And so going back to your point, Charles, what you're saying is that like, there's this thing around you do it for me. Like you do it to make it easier for me, and you do it for me, and you create the place psychological safety for me. But what that's communicating often is, I need you to put in the work that I may, exactly, that I may not put in myself, right? That I may not put in that work myself. So if I am, like, it's communication, it's whatever it may be. It's like you create the stage that's easier for me. I was like, or I create the stage and you create the stage for you, and we bring these stages together. But it's often this tit for tat development thing. Yeah.
Well, you know, something that didn't age well, or maybe it did age well, depending on your perspective, is something that I heard Will Smith say a while ago. Like this was a few years ago, like when sort of people were more in the beginning of like questioning he and Jada. I gotta go here. I'm sorry, I gotta go here. but like Will had a TikTok video or something like where he said they made the choice to make themselves happy instead of depending on the other one to make them happy. So they said, we separate, do whatever we got to do. And when you're complete, when you're fully happy, then we can come together. But we can't be together expecting the other one to make us happy with ourselves, right? And the reason I say that, like, for good or bad, because, you know, as much as people hate, like, they still together in some form or fashion. So whatever makes them happy is making them happy to where it's working out, whatever that looks like. You know what I mean? So that's why I think that statement still rings true. Of being a complete person. But I know Max has something, but I want to touch on the psychology of what you said. Like, and you may know, you may not, but the psychology of the mindset of like when people say, well, if you witness abuse as a child, you tend to automatically be an abuser, or you will accept abuse. I've heard people say it about like growing up around drinking and smoking. It's like if you're around it as you grow up, it's kind of, instead of you being like, that's bad, shouldn't do it. Somehow subconsciously in the gray matter or something, like we sort of automatically go into that lifestyle.
It becomes an easier option to select it.
So I'm curious on the psychology behind like sort of those generational curses.
I think man, I'm so glad you said that.
Are we selecting?
So that's a great question. There's a thing we do. It's called the menu made for you, and it's this example of, if I handed you a menu of like 5 different options, and I was like, order whatever you want off this menu, did you really ever get a choice? And that's a real question. And in this room, they usually ask this too. Some people think I'm like, it's like a trick question, but the reality is that you did get a choice, but off of the limited structure that I selected for you. And so if you grew up in an environment, I do believe in free will. I believe we all have it. But I do believe we can put people in positions where the choices become harder to make. That menu, that situation, it wasn't order whatever you want. It was whatever you want off of what I have selected. And so these options might have been what I was raised around or grew up around. That to choose and to buck this menu would mean I start to break, generational curses and situations. Because generational curses are really learned behavior. That's really what that is, right? It's saying it's the learned behavior from generation to generation to generation. We might have set each other up in a really, like, put them downhill. I think we got free will. We can definitely choose to not order off that menu, but it's extremely hard when the menu is all you've ever been shown and that
Yeah.
It's extremely hard.
I mean, unless you're my wife and you just say, can you make it like this? Don't put this on it. And, all that. I'd be like, can we order off the menu?
Right. It's just easier. It is. But you know what? Max says exactly what he said. It's easier. It's easier just to order off the menu that's made for you. But to say, no, I don't want anything you presented to me. And I'd like to mix and match it. And then you have, we're talking generation. Someone's going to look at you, a parent, an aunt or whatever, and look at you and say, that's never been done before in our lineage or in our legacy. Like you just tweaking things and freaking it up and twisting it up has never been done. You're up, for some. That's a whole new thing, right?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to say, Josh, I'm with you. You speak in my language with everything that you've said here, but I realize that there's some people that are listening who are calling it bogus, right?
Sure.
And we live in a society where I feel like people. It's not an and thing. It's people or it's processes. Pick one.
Yes.
Especially when we're dealing with so many problems, social ills in the world. So yeah, what's your response to that?
I think it is holistic thinking is a choice and an ability. Right? It's choosing to look at multiple perspectives and to hold it and say that'll influence your value. So I think about a baseball game or a football game, and we're all sitting at different stands, right? And then we get together and talk about the game later. And I'm like, man, so I was behind like Duggar's Mound. You're like, I was in the nosebleeds and I was on the opposite team. And we get together and start talking about it. You're going to hear completely different sides of the game. You're gonna hear completely different sides, and I'm gonna hear a game experience from you that was nothing like I experienced whatsoever. I was behind the Duggar's Mound, so it's all I see and it's all I know. And you're bringing a perspective of the game from the nosebleeds. The problem is instead of naturally saying all of these stories help communicate the game, because it's different than my experience, I automatically put it in a bucket of it's wrong. Because it wasn't my experience. It wasn't what I lived through. It wasn't what I typically have known. It wasn't what I touched or what I felt or whatever it may be. But the reality is, just like the coin that we hold in our hand that has one side, it has another side, but it's just not the one that we see. And so the goal isn't this is where I tell people that understanding isn't agreement, and it doesn't have to be. I can understand this game we all went to from all these different perspectives that really just inform my story. And so now my story doesn't become just about what I see, even though I'm the one telling it. I'm like, but I talked to two other people and they said they saw something really different about that. So now it creates a holistic story, but I have to care about that.
You have to care.
I have to care enough to be able to say. And so holistic, there's a psychologist that says the best thinkers have the ability to embrace paradox. Now, she said the ability to, not the intention to. So abilities, right? Abilities are skills. They are developed. They are like, you can prove an ability. You can actually prove, but have the ability to embrace paradox, hold two opposing thoughts at one time. And the reason why that becomes the best thinker, because I think even those people that are listening, you talk to about Maxine, they would probably all agree that the brain is a muscle. Everyone would agree to that. It's a muscle like any other muscle, your bicep, tricep, your tibia, whatever, I don't know. But the reality is, which means we can take it to the gym. So how do you take this muscle to the gym? You start to put it in situations to exercise abilities that it hasn't in a long time. That's why most of the time when people are done like workshopping with us, they're brain fatigue, because I tell them that we took the brain to the gym. And so by hearing and entertaining this other side of the baseball game, the fact that I'm taking my brain to the gym and I'm hearing and I'm not initially bucking it and I'm listening to it. I may not, it's practice, right? When we go to the gym, it's practice over and over again. But what I'm doing is I'm putting my brain in situations to be exercised in ways that it isn't typically. And then suddenly it becomes easier. And I don't buck the opposing opinion so much. I don't feel that when people are questioning me that I'm being questioned, that it's actual questions of curiosity, because I'm starting to get my brain used to questions. When I'm presented with change and challenge, I'm suddenly not like tensed up and anxiety, because I'm starting to put myself in positions to think about change and challenge a little more. Take the thing to the gym. Take it to the gym, because then it doesn't have to be an either or. It's a all. It's an all of it. Again, and the fact that I understand your perspective of the baseball game doesn't mean I have to agree with it. But I took my brain to the gym enough to understand it.
Yeah, man. Thank you. We are joined by Joshua Renee. of the Spill Team. And Joshua, how about this? How about we take a quick break?
Yeah.
And then we come back, we could dive head first into your human series.
Oh, cool. Absolutely.
On because you are a design consultancy, and you can tell the folks what is a human-centered design, through that. So cool. Tell a friend. We are gonna be right back with none other than Joshua Renee, IMHO Talk Show. IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
IMHO Talk Show. Sir Charles, Miss Max, Razor.
You're listening to In My Humble Opinion with Maxilia Robinson and Charles Lewis, only on 101.3 Jams.
To the Izzo Talk Show, Sir Charles, Miss Max. And we are back like we never left because we are still here in the booth with none other than Joshua Renee of Spillteem. And Joshua, this, so far has been as expected. You are per advertised.
Someone say you're consistent.
But no, and I hope listeners, and please continue to chime in online, if you will, whether you're listening or viewing, because hopefully, like, you're getting a message from from the show today. A lot of it is just us, looking, I think what we've heard, Max, looking internally, being content there, being complete there, and then being able to communicate, clearly, right? And, like as to what the need is.
Yeah.
Putting people first.
Yeah.
I think everybody we've talked to today is about putting people first, people before the process, as Joshua says. And Joshua, you getting some shout outs online too. You gotta love Joshua, Renee, and Spillteem. That's what one viewer said.
Oh, that's cool.
Yes, indeed.
That's cool.
So thank y'all.
I love you too. I love you too.
So let's go ahead and jump into your current initiative.
Yeah.
Called Simply Human.
Yeah.
Break that down. I mean, it sounds simplistic.
Yeah.
But what's the meaning behind human?
Yeah. What I tell people first off with like human-centered design, a little bit of what that is, and it's a different way to think and work. And so we inject this different way to think and work into problem solving. Same problems have existed, man. We've done so many different, we've done like marketing strategies and business strategies and people development, all this other stuff. They've never gone away. But human-centered design is a different way to think and work about solving that problem. And so I do let people know this people first, process second thing could very well be this idea of thinking less of yourself, right? But what I say is human-centered design is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about others more. So it's okay. You don't have to like belittle your, it's none of that. It's literally, you're staying where you are, but you are thinking about others more than yourself, right? This idea of, again, going back to that, Maxine, is like this choosing thing. It's like, no, I don't have to like less to think more. So what we've experienced on the Spillteem side with a lot of the work and within organizations is, there's just something about leadership. And I've had a lot of conversations with leaders. I mean, I've had one-on-one conversations, closed doors, in the car, like cell phone, late at night with a lot of leaders that run organizations and spearhead teams and change. And man, it is lonely for them. It is super, super lonely. And I think why it is, I think about certain leaders that have redefined a little bit of our culture, if I could. I think about a Henry Ford who looks at a bunch of horses and says, let's make a car, right? I think about, NASA, who's like, that big, cool, yellow, white thing in the sky. Let's go ahead and put another human on that planet for the first time. I think about people like Martin Luther King, who woke up and said, I think I'll risk my family's life for these values today. Love him or hate him, Elon Musk, Kanye West changed the face of music. Elon Musk changed the face of what transportation and technology will forever look like. But here's the thing.
Yeah. And can I ask something?
Yeah, please. Like, you got someone to add to the roster of like,
I do actually.
Yeah, please.
Nikola Tesla.
Yeah.
Like, who the Tesla's named after.
Absolutely.
Like, if I'm not mistaken, he was the first person to talk about wireless technology.
Yeah.
Now think how crazy you had to be looked at.
Yeah.
For you to be like, I'm going to communicate with no strings attached. I'm going to send things like just through the ether.
That's it.
Can you imagine how he was looked
That's
at?
what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So imagine his community, and you can call community in 2023. Imagine the team you lead, the city you live in, the neighbors you have, Nikola Tesla, the community he has, the Henry Fords, the community that surrounded Martin Luther King. Of course, eventually people got on board, but imagine stating that value. You had to be looked at like you were crazy.
Yeah.
And so what I
didn't mean to cut you off.
No, dude. I mean, I'm adding to the list. I'm adding to my roster. By the way, email us or whatever. Maybe if you got any other ones to add to the list,
go put it in the chat.
And drop it in the chat. But the reality is these are these leaders and they're leading new thought, right? They're leading new vision. And often because they're the individuals with the forethought that groups of people, communities say, you must be good to go. Because leaders, I mean, you have a Barack Obama, right? To be able to to be able to grow up and look, I think I read someone saying that he had to have a little bit of ego. And you had to have a little bit of ego because you have to be able to, at whatever teen years old, to look your world in the face and say, yeah, I'll be president. Yeah, I'll be president of the United. I will take the highest position of the United States of America. Right. And
of the world, right?
Of the world, right? Literally. And so my thought around the responsibility of that type of thinker, the things that they're weighted with. And so me and my team, we looked at ourselves and we asked ourselves, and we saw this within organizations as well, is where do leaders get to go? Where do they get to go where they're not having to prove their point, right? Where they're not having to show up again for their team all the time, right? Because the team needs this from them. Yeah, to be human. There you go. Where do they get to go? And so we created Human, which is a series of just leadership events. And it's a place for these leaders to come and to show up and say, man, I don't have to prove myself here. I don't have to jump through a bunch of hurdles and hoops here. I don't have to, there's not an expectation of my team that's here. And so we're creating 4 different events. One is around helping leaders with authentic connections, because we all know in the communities we live in, put the song and dance and put the mask on and connect that particular way. So there's human connections. There's going to be human strategy leadership events where leaders actually get the right tools that they need and deserve. There's going to be a series of dinners, which is ideas at night. These are the leaders have these ideas at night and afraid to walk in Monday morning at 9 o'clock with them because of all the meetings that they'll have to have around it, Charles. But the reality is that idea literally might change the game.
Yeah.
But and then the last one is around human conversations, where there's real life conversations and talks and panels that where these leaders get to go and just where things aren't asked of them.
So what makes a person eligible to attend something like this?
Yeah.
I mean, what how are you defining leader here?
That's a good question. So we have kind of a bit of a criteria where that this responsibility that these individuals have to hold around like decision making, direction setting, developing like people, process, and ops. Culture, change management, because everyone, will say that they're a leader, but we all have leadership abilities and potentials. But I'm looking for the leader that's weary. I'm looking for the leader that has like carried this for a long time by themselves. And we're looking for that person. So they kind of, there are some responsibilities that they are to have in their role in organization that kind of qualify them a little bit.
And that can be nonprofit or for-profit?
Absolutely. Nonprofit, for-profit, all are welcome. They can definitely like email, message, DM, we'll get them a registration. But we are wanting leaders to be able to come in and be able to say like, man, this place was made for me. Like it was a place that is not asking me of anything.
Yeah. And I'm curious, have you seen the need to partner with other organizations in order to maybe access those who really need this? Like, for some reason, CNE came to mind.
Yeah.
Right, Center for Nonprofit Excellence, and I know they have like a Leaders of Color collective.
Yeah.
So I'm curious if any of your marketing reaches out through other organizations.
Yeah, it's a great question. So a couple of organizations have reached out and wanted to be a part. Beautiful thing is we've been able to host this in partnership with the Vault, and I believe that the development of people also happens in the development of the space that they get to be in. And so the Vault has created just a beautiful environment for us to be able to actually ask leaders to come into the space with no expectation. It's just super beautiful. But we have organizations reach out to us. But to be honest, we like we were talking offline, man, we stand true to some of our values, and that organization and their intentions around wanting to partner have to be pure. And it has to be able to serve, because the reason why we're creating this space for leaders is because I've asked leaders before, like, how was that conference or that summit? And I've had leaders come back and it's like, yeah, about that.
Yeah.
And nothing. And I was like, yeah, let's create a space for you. And so we want to make sure that it isn't just intention and execution are two different things. So if there is an organization that wants to partner with us, what we're really going to dive into is the execution that truly serve these leaders well. Because these leaders are trusting us with themselves. They're trusting that, and we're going to protect that. And we're going to,
I think that this type of project is a game changer, for real. Like I've heard conversations about people feeling like there's either a dearth in leadership or just leery of the existing leadership. Not locally, I don't mean that, but definitely nationally. And so for the Charlottesville community or surround whoever is plan to attend the event, to have access to something like this that can help build them as a leader, to me is a game changer for what they can then bring to the people that
that's it,
here.
right? Like I think if impact people that impact people that impact people, and this is the idea is that certain team members are like they get to go to certain things all the time, but my biggest question is like, where does this leader get to go? Where do they get to actually go where they are truly filled up? Because if I'm in a room and I have this expectation that's still required of me because I see like certain team members or whatever it may be, it's still hard, right? It's hard to be poured into. And so that is our hope, that we can get these leaders together and serve them from, human connections, human strategy, human conversation, and human ideas where they can vision vulnerably, that they then take that back, right? And they go back to the individuals that they're responsible to impact and go do that. But it's hard to be, to put out a fire and prevent the fire at the same time.
And, I would argue to say that
I love when you argue, Max.
At the end of the day, at least for me, right?
I love it.
Like being appreciated goes so much further than I'm not gonna say bonus, but like just being appreciated and knowing that your work is valued and feeling like you have a place in whatever it is that you're participating in and being poured into by whoever the leader is goes so much further with me and maybe even other individuals as well. It's something that encourages you to show up on time, work your hardest, and all those other things that come along with that,
what's funny is I've the opposite side of this. Yeah, I mean, you're 100%. The opposite side of this, when I've talked to certain leaders even about this, I've watched leaders in front of me as I'm talking to them about the human events. I watched them get anxious. It's sitting in front of me. Like I've watched them because there's data around leaders psychologically, mental health. I mean, there's a lot like that leader carries. There's a lot. I mean, we named a few that they carry. And a leader is behavior, right? That choosing to go and create the thing or do the thing or say the thing that no one else is saying. There's a lot they carry when it comes to visioning a thing or no one else sees. And I've talked to a couple leaders and I've watched them like in front of me start to like sweat and get anxious and get concerned with just thinking about having a space that like fuels them and pours into them. So proved in the pudding, but
So lastly, as we're coming to the end and wrap up, I'm curious if you've ever or if you would consider working with youth in the work that you do. And I say that on the heels of Max, did you know that the word authentic is the Webster Dictionary's word of the year? And so folks are saying that that's because of the rise in AI, artificial intelligence, and how so that made people use the word authentic or looking for the authenticity of stuff more so, right? So and
how to leverage your authenticity as well.
Important.
It isn't like this just cool thing you like, it's like where parents tell their kids like just be authentic. There's a way to actually do it and build it. Yeah.
So that's sort of how I wanted to close with you, like with if you ever have or are interested in working with the youth and what would be your recommendation when it comes to us figuring out why, like what's troubling our youth, when it comes to them being able to express themselves in a healthy way.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to. I've been able to speak at like some teen summits and stuff like that as well. Would love to be able to pour into who we're going to leave this world to when we're done. Absolutely. Right. Like, and that's the hope, right? Is that we are creating bridges for individuals to be able to walk across that when we're done. But one of my biggest things that I've talked about, especially with authenticity, is first you have to deal with the comparison thing. Like first, I mean, that's always going to show up. But if the only reason why we compare is because we begin to see more value in something and less value in the other thing. And even from a tangible spot, right? Influencer, whatever it may be, that person had more attention, right? So I'm going to go back to like what Max and I were talking about with values is that I recommend for every individual, every youth, every teenager that's out there and it will evolve and change. But I think annually you should create a value system. Annually, which is around your causes, your actions, and your impacts. The things that wake you up at night, the things you go do, and what's impacted by doing those things. And it's a bit of a compass in helping every teenager, every youth actually create their own kind of value compass and being able to hold into it. And then I think when it comes to parents or teachers, instead of like trying to you should just be a great impact in this world. Like, why would you ever put that pressure on a 12 or 13-year-old? So then when you get to actually do is instead of just be authentic, right? It's like, hey, pull out your values real quick. Let's talk about, I saw you in that incident and that one right there was compromised. Let's talk about that. Like, you got to get specific, right? This idea of like change the world and be your best self and all these other like fluffy bumpers.
I still use that line, be your best self. Hold on.
But hold on back. What I would do with that is, and I know you would be able to do it, I would say, how do you do that? And you would begin to break it down. I am in my best self by doing this, living this way, acting this way, by these causes, actions, and impacts. So you'd be able to give people the ingredients. And so what I want us to let's give teenagers a branded tagline. Let's absolutely do it. But I want to equip individuals with how. Equip them with how, and then that helps equip with how we guide them also specifically, right? With some instruction, right? This idea of it sets them up for failure, man. If we're saying you should go that way, and like what way? It's like, let's get this compass that guides you. It guides the way you think, it guides the way you feel, and it guides the way you act and how you show up in the world. And if we ever go off track, similar to the little ridges on the side of the street that go that thing, it pulls you right back on. So we want that compass will do that for those.
Instruction.
Some people call that the Holy Spirit.
There you go.
Instruction is important, and you know they have church, but let me get my comment in.
And you can close.
But instruction is important, right? And I always, Charles may recognize this, but I always make sure that when we start telling people what they should do, and I make sure that we pause to be able to tell them how to. You can't just be spewing out stuff and not give them any practical way to accomplish that. But we are out of time. This is a great conversation. I'm sorry it's getting cut short a little bit, but you'll be back. You'll be back. How do people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so you can email me, Joshua at Spillteem, and that's team with 2 E's. So it's SPILLTEEM.com. Email me, Joshua at Spillteem, and we can chat.
All right. Yeah. Great show. Thank you to all of our guests. Charlottesville family, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. We'll see you next time.
IMHO Talk Show.